You're strong.
I know.
It's okay. I've got you now.
Just like in the movies.
Welcome to Super Wonder Legacy, the only show that knows that Tom King's Wonder Woman is not worth the toilet paper it's published on. I'm Jared. I'm here with Brit. What's up, Brit?
Wow. What a way to start.
That just popped in my head.
What a way to start it. Hi, and wow.
I like to throw Brit off balance for that. So today we're talking about what is probably one of the biggest annoyances that Brit and I both have with modern comic book media and, in a certain way, comic book fandom. And that's the whole trope about evil Superman / evil superheroes in general trope that's come out, particularly with like The Boys, Injustice and stuff. Invincible is different, and we'll talk briefly about that. The thing about Invincible is that Omni-Man gets a redemption arc, and we'll talk about that later. But still, it's like with the problem is, if we didn't have fans that constantly said that Superman is this close to turning into Omni-Man or like Homelander, I wouldn't be that upset. But these people exist on Twitter.
Right. And they are overtaking like every conversation.
Exactly. So, and yeah, they're saying if Superman doesn't have Lois, he turns into Omni-Man. Or I keep saying Omni-Man, but it's the same thing. Anyway, so The Boys is interesting. So, Britt, how much of The Boys have you watched?
Only season 1 because I couldn't handle the rest.
Oh God. I've watched all of it. Pray for my sanity.
Why would you torture yourself?
Because part of it is, see, here's the problem with The Boys. It started off great because it was making fun of like celebrity and superhero culture. Then and they made fun of both sides of the political spectrum. Then it got to they were making fun of one side exclusively, and I was like, something isn't working. I mean, there was a great joke where in season 2 they're filming the Dawn of the Seven movie, and they're like, these Joss Whedon scripts really bring it all together. And then there's a campaign to release the Bork cut of Dawn of the Seven. And I'm like, oh, nice. But the thing is, all right, when we finish recording this, Brit, I'm going to describe to you a scene in The Boys that has become notorious with season 2. And yeah, but the thing it involves a man and his private parts. Let me put it to you that way. So I know that, but see, the thing about so it's written by Garth Ennis, and by the way, as bad as as intense as the show is, from what I've seen, the comic is 20 to 30 times worse.
Yeah, when it first came out, about having the live action adaptation, I was curious to see, okay, cool, it has a comic book. The first image I saw, I was like, nope, no. I just Googled and I was no.
Yeah, I'm like, The Boys. Oh my God.
Nah, it was, and the thing is, it was traumatizing too because it was Homelander, of course, and it was very disturbing to see. Okay, yeah, the obvious character designs are meant to be, Superman and Wonder Woman and not Green Lantern,
there is no Green Lantern in this.
And it's kind of like, okay, yeah, we get the satire type thing and all of that, but at that time, when you also have injustice that's overtaking the narrative and Superman and Wonder Woman's image, it's kind of like, no, we don't need more of this. So what I saw in the comic, I just it traumatized me. And why did I watch season one? I felt like, with it having good reviews, and people were like, well, it's just entertainment, and this is all what it should be about, that you don't take this seriously. But it became too much. It's there's
Oh,
an
trust
over
me.
exaggeration of it, to where, again, the audience takes it where it takes it seriously. And then you have it where the comic, DC, well, especially DC, they take it and run with it. And then we have Injustice, um, all of those comic prequels or sequels, and then we have the Injustice game. And it's kind of like, or you have it when it bleeds into main continuity, and you have Superman act, borderline like Homelander or Omni-Man. And with 5G, the fact that he was going to be a dictator, um and is Morrison implied, apparently it was going to be because Lois kicked the bucket. So it's kind of like, why is this a
What?
thing?
But
Yeah,
it's because, again, they're trying to emphasize a character that is not really as important as people think. But anyway, but with this, at least the show, to a certain degree, downplays the comic. In other words, it's the show is more PG than the comic is, and that says a lot. Particularly
that
when I
says
describe something that happens in season 2 of the show, Brit.
that says a, a lot, a
Okay,
lot.
here's an example. I have to figure out how I can phrase this. All right. Do you know what the Deep does to Starlight in season 1, right?
You know what? I done forgotten. I don't want to be reminded, but continue on.
So he basically says, I can get you kicked off the team if you don't do me a favor, if you catch
Favor,
my
yeah,
drift. Okay.
right.
So in the comic, it's the whole team.
No way.
I kid you not. I only know this because I've watched YouTube summaries and I'm like, ah.
Yeah, that's exactly your reaction. That is okay. So yeah, I'm definitely going to um ignore and
Yeah,
stay
do,
away
do not read the
from.
comics. I've had multiple opportunities to pick them up, and I'm like, nope, I like my lunch, but it's like, see, the thing is, the problem with this, and actually, it's good that we're also going to talk a little bit about Invincible about this, because and I've said this on the show many times. Think about Invincible versus the Boys. The Boys, even though Garth Ennis likes superheroes, he treats them in this show like they're freaking idiots and that they're all immoral. In Invincible, it's coming from a position of someone that clearly loves superheroes. That's the difference here. One is coming from it's kind of funny. Garth says he likes Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, but his Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman in the show, in the comics, are
The worst ones.
not moral. Let me put it to you that way. And that's concerned, because so he had a character that he created called Hitman, who basically is the Punisher who murders people. And because he likes Superman, when Superman showed up in the Hitman series, he had Superman go, you know what, Hitman, you're a cool guy. Superman didn't know that Hitman actually murdered people, but he had Superman stand up to Hitman in front of Batman.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I'm not. It's really weird, but it's like, honestly, the problem with the Boys is that it, like I said, comes from a position of people that hate superheroes. Like, all right, so here's the basic idea. So it's one of the weirdest comic book design. It's one of the weirdest things of comics I've ever invented. Like, I mean, I've ever thought of. So, Britt,
The silence.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think how to say this. Actually, you know what? I'll describe it off the show. I can't risk it here.
Yeah.
But the thing is with this It's like there's a way to do this and not come off like you hate superheroes. And I'm sorry, The Boys kind of comes off like that.
The thing is, I mean, he let it be known that he hates superheroes, and he definitely,
Well,
achieved that with this. The thing
well,
is,
do you know what Ennis wrote for Marvel? This is his opinion on superheroes. You ready? Punisher kills the Marvel universe.
Punisher.
Yeah, he just murders every Marvel superhero.
I, mm, I
You know how
don't.
he kills the Hulk? He waits until the Hulk reverts back into Bruce Banner and falls asleep, and then he comes up behind Bruce and shoots him in the head.
Oh,
Do you know
that's
how he kills Iron Man? He EMPs the suit so Iron Man can't escape. So Iron Man's essentially entombed in the suit, and then Punisher just leaves him there and lets him suffocate in the suit.
oh, that's awful.
I'm like, ah,
I
it's
mean, that's
cool, but I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you real. And whenever he had to run the Punisher, and whenever other superheroes showed up, he would treat them like they're morons.
I. I mean, if you don't like them, just don't, you know, write them. Or
Yeah. Well, let me put it this way. This is the one time I'm ever going to say this on the show. He Tom King is better than this guy.
oh, that is putting it like
I'd
that
rather
is
have
a
Tom
low
King than
bar.
Garth Ennis on this. I gotta be honest here. This
Oh
is this is the
wow.
only time I'm ever gonna say that.
Wow. That is that is such a
Just
low
trust me.
bar.
I've read a good portion of Enos's work, and I'm like, yeah. I'm like, at least because King hits the target way more than Enos does. But all right. So let's talk about the themes of the origins and themes of the boys. Brit?
Okay. So, first of all, this is I'm glad that I never really watched any more of this, or even, attempted to, even though I was traumatized from the first image that I saw, I wasn't tempted to uh see any more until, of course, we have to do our research for this show. And and the more that I saw
and
here,
Brit, the show gets so much more intense as the seasons go on. Oh
and
God. When you said only season one, I legit out loud I said, oh no.
I mean, even the image that we see with the stand-in for Wonder Woman, hitting with the hitting Homelander with the sword is kind of like, just that whole thing. Homelander is very, I would say, s- the live action Homelander is very much sanitized from the comic version,
Mm-hmm.
because the you know like I said, what I saw is just very traumatizing, and I 0 out of 10 do not recommend anyone to read this at all. If you
No.
do, if you are interested in the boys, you can watch the show. I
Watch the
wouldn't
show,
recommend that.
don't read the comics. Do
Yeah.
not read the comics.
So the boys was created in 2006, and this is pretty much, you know, superheroes were they weren't as popular, I would say. It wasn't really that time. So any type of criticism of superheroes were pretty much warranted, because, no one cared for the happy-go-lucky, picnic and rainbows type thing in the first place. Um, Superman, this is, like I said, 2006. This is when Superman Returns came about, and just Superman
Mm-hmm.
was pretty much boring, to the general audience. And it really just showed how cynical, the world, not the creative, and the world, started to evolve to. Um, So The Boys was initially published by Wildstorm, which I did not know that. And honestly, I'm glad that DC, they actually made a good decision and was kind of like, this is too much that we can't, promote this, can't
I like
publish
to
this.
think that when DC bought like Wildstorm, Didio was like, okay, so let's see what you got. Okay, what's this boys project? Oh my god.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think that was the reaction for sure. And then it shifted to Dynamite Entertainment. And yeah, it definitely needs to be on an independent type publishing because like I said, it's just too much. And anyone who has, you can be creative, but the creativity that went into this was, you definitely need a psych evaluation, after this. um so yeah, it's a
Oh my god.
deconstruction of superhero mythology and satire, and showing how basically the realism in the worst way possible, of superheroes. And then you have a team that's basically like Argus, or Amanda Waller to keep them in check, which obviously with these superheroes, and I wouldn't even call them superheroes. They still do their own thing. So you have corruption of power. Most of the superheroes are self-serving, morally corrupt and bankrupt. They and above the law. Um, you also have corporate control, which is basically there. It's a business. You have the marketing and stuff like that. You have
So it's
them
like Disney.
on, well, yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Or
Um,
more accurately, in terms of evilness, Warner Brothers.
I would say Disney is more evil, but
In
yeah,
terms of
Warner
mishandling superheroes, let's be honest.
Warner Brothers is just dumb. Like they are very much, yeah, they're dumb. Disney is evil. Like they will like ruin your entire career type, you know.
And remember when they were promoting one of the new Star Wars movies to promote the movie overseas for the overseas posters in like China, they made the black guy in Star Wars smaller on the poster.
Exactly. You do stuff like that. That's even more, that's evil. And then you have, of course, where the heroes want to be worshipped like gods and stuff like that. But yeah, it's awful, obviously. And like I said, you definitely, whether you are the reader or the creator, you need a psyche valve because this it, it can be a well constructed critique on gods, on heroes, on the fans themselves too. We see on Twitter a headcanon galore of some of these, fans, the way they think of these characters, whether it's shipping or what they would do in certain situations or their personality. It is some that go overboard and into where it's kind of like, are we looking at the same character? Of the 90 years that these um, characters, the traditional superheroes that they have existed, it I would much rather, if you have to choose between the boys and being stuck with traditional, status quo, I would rather have the traditional status quo.
Yeah,
The
yeah. Because here's the thing. Because here's the thing, Barry Brit. So you know what I did once? I wanted to see how intense it is. So I went to Amazon and I went to the Amazon preview of The Boys. This was
you
my
did.
face in the preview. Because
Yeah,
I'm turning it, I'm like, okay, okay, blood. I'm used to blood and gore, but then it cuts to certain people getting it on, and I'm like, Okay, I need to go bleach my brain.
I mean, that's fine if you want to do, a
Hey,
little
you do
this
you,
and
but
that.
it's not me. Hey,
Uh,
if it sells, fine, but I'm not. I'm not doing that.
yeah, it's like it's fine to have
I'd
that.
rather read Tom King's Wonder Woman than this. I gotta be honest.
Honestly, I would say yes because and that shows how traumatizing this is for us because if we are choosing, something that we rant about and critique all the time and that you
If
have
I'm saying
created a
I'd rather have
hashtag.
Tom King write books than this, that says something.
Yes, and like I said, it is entertainment, but when it goes too far, when fans, take it as something serious, and the influence that it has the worst, influence that it should never have had. It can be a popular show. It can be, like I said, it can have that entertainment thing. But when you have fans that think that this is how heroes are supposed to be, or
Or
they,
like, or like in the case of Injustice, Injustice finds in Elseworlds, but when people say that without Lois, Superman turns into an evil dictator, then I got issues.
right. So just having that is so you just have to be careful, and especially now, with how the internet and how certain things of entertainment basically influence a lot of the generation.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting. So Enos's views on superheroes.
Okay, so he he does not like superheroes, which is
Really?
right. It's kind of like, yeah, you made an entire
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah. I mean, it it could be written across his forehead. He can have a big light, you know, um, billboard. We know. But he likes Superman, of course, for his selfless ideal and being pure. Which, I mean, yeah, but if you see that in Superman being the first superhero and how you know other heroes are supposed to follow his lead. I just don't get why you don't like other heroes, especially when they are supposed to be, unique in their own sense of even though they have the same template, I would say that Superman started. Like I said, they're still unique. So his critique and then liking Superman is very much a contradiction.
I know.
Contradiction to me. And he says that Superman doesn't seek power or revenge. He simply wants to be good. He respects Superman's um, power is balanced by his humility and morality. I mean, that's every other hero. So again, his
I'm
whole
like,
entire
okay.
history is weird. And then with Wonder Woman, it's basically the same thing. He doesn't obviously, as all creators, they don't really speak too much on her, but it's still the same thing as Superman. And it's just kind of like, yeah, um, you, every critique that he has is kind of like he's made it his for his own self, because even with the Wonder Woman, it's that she's has genuine heroism without self-insertion or this, and it's kind of like, yeah, you your thoughts are put into creating the boys as you never actually had this type of vision, with the traditional superheroes. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really,
and his Superman is
yeah, it's like everything that you hate of superheroes, you created it yourself. It's like I really don't get that line of thinking.
Plus, you know what's kind of funny? When I when you sent me the show notes and I saw like his opinion on Wonder Woman based upon what happens in the boys, I'm like, I'm not sure I want to know that.
Right. it's like I said, it's very much a contradiction because every critique is basically what he wrote himself,
Hmm.
and it's not what was actually within the comics or anything at that time. Now, like I said, with the influence of the boys or you know, or injustice, we do have those iterations and those point of views for Superman and Wonder Woman now after these things are being have been brought up. So honestly, you blame the boys and injustice for how Superman and Wonder Woman are now. You know, so it's basically your own fault that we have a Wonder Woman that's more even though she did start with the warrior type thing in like the late pre-crisis, um, it wasn't so much as, of course, we had George Perez. You know, he had Diana innocent, and but she was a fighter. She was a warrior, but the warrior of peace. A lot of people want to blame Kingdom Come, but it's like actually read the story to understand Diana's circumstances of why she became the um, more jaded, hardened warrior that she was, and how at the end she became softer, and how she became a mother, you know. So honestly, you can't really use even Kingdom Come, but every other iteration that has had Wonder Woman as the warrior has been because of the it's the fault of writers that basically throw a rock and hide their hands, and it's kind of like you are the ones that are influenced this, and you are the ones that are fueling this or putting more emphasis on something. If you don't like it, if you don't want it to define the character, stop writing it then. You know, it's so simple to make these characters who they actually are supposed to be instead of fueling that more cynical view.
Would you believe, Brit, that I've heard anti-Snyder people compare Snyder's Superman to Homelander?
Now, that is no. Why would you do that?
Exactly. I'm like, at no point in any of those movies is he remotely like Homelander.
Yeah, that is just ridiculous. That is no.
Yeah. So then we get to the impact because here's the thing. Like Britt and I said, here's the thing. Here's why I watch the show, because to a degree, I like seeing a alternate take on superheroes, and I know that if it's a show, there is a limit to what they will do. The thing about and again, I have no problem with alternate stories or anyone having their own unique perspectives on superheroes. Totally fine. The issue is when to that with modern audiences start to see this as the way all superheroes are or should be, like Britt said, that's when it starts to get problematic. Because here's the thing. Again, Injustice is actually, I was about to say it's not a bad story. That's not true. But the concept of injustice, an evil Superman at the time. Now it's just overplayed. But at the time, I'm like, oh, this actually sounds really cool. The problem is, then people apply that to the main continuity, and I'm like, no. See, here's my problem, Britt. Too many people look at Injustice and say, okay, only Lois dying leads to him becoming evil, and I'm like, have you seen the nuke that goes off?
Right. And like I said, it's always bizarre. Injustice is bizarro Kingdom Come. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have Diana as she was Clark's, moral compass and trying to get him to fix, what's going on. And like I said, look at her as the mother perspective. But then in Injustice, she is the uh Macbeth,
Mm-hmm.
character, the temptress, the the devil on his shoulder. She is, and the way they've tried to explain how Diana became who she was just doesn't make sense when you are doing a prequel for a prequel, which is year one of and having the JSA and how, and Diana is supposed to be old as dirt, first hero on the JSA and stuff like that. And she's been like with other male figures. It's like, okay, so how did she turn evil? And it's never answered. The only thing is um basically, blaming Steve, which again, even Steve's character, I don't think that with trying to make Clark and Diana obsessed and, you know, um so unhealthily in love with Lois and Steve, you make them unstable. You make them emotionally, you know, uh
Not only that, it's the fact that so she stays evil and doesn't trust men throughout even serving on the JSA and JLA when she served with the best men she's ever known. Her words, not mine. Logically, that origin is lazy as hell and doesn't make sense.
yeah, none of Injustice makes sense. You have to really twist the characters, especially Superman and Wonder Woman, or especially Wonder Woman,
Well, essentially,
is
I always equate injustice to a sweater that's been made by someone that has never netted a sweater before. There is so many loose threads, and if you pull one, the entire thing unravels.
that is so true. That is a great analogy to, yes, that is so
I'm
true.
just like, because it's like if all Batman has to do is say, okay, dude, it's okay, dude. I'm gonna because when you look at Superman's fall, most of it starts when Batman acts out of character because Batman himself has the contingency plans. He knows Superman. It's Superman going evil is not a good idea. He's not in the right mindset. I am going to like be there for my best friend. But no, because he killed someone, Batman has to be a bat male body part and just isolate him from his friends and drive him more toward a woman that's clearly trying to push him more toward domination. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Right. And I just honestly, again, Diana is never the manipulative type. She first, another thing is she has the lasso of truth. And the thing is, it works when the writer wants it to work. Diana is the embodiment of truth, and then having the lasso on her hip all the time, meaning she can't tell a lie, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that even goes more so with Rebirth, because if Diana has had the lasso of truth, she wouldn't have been stuck 10 years in an illusion by the gods. You know, that's a whole nother thing I know, but I'm just saying that, just an
I mean,
example
Rebirth.
of,
I've never been
yeah,
home.
yeah, just saying, to basically round off what I'm saying is that the lasso is supposed to be this powerful, magical thing that the truth is will always be revealed, with Diana. And again, she is the embodiment of truth. She has it on her hip all the time. She can't tell a lie. So how is it that, first of all, she lived a lie, and how is it that she can, be that temptress, or and that manipulator? It just really doesn't make any sense.
And real quick, before we move on, I just want to bring up. Speaking of like the I've never been home before, I want to stress this point. If she's never been home, explain Superman and Deathstroke
And Batman, when Damian was
and Batman.
yeah,
Explain that.
everyone has been on the island. Even Steve.
Yeah.
it's like,
So I'm like, what?
yeah,
Again, that's the occasion of they want to retcon out the new 52 stuff, but don't want to put any thought into doing so. But anyway, that's what that's what this leads to. Everyone doesn't like heroes because there are people that like there's no way Superman could be all good. Now, that does lead to because we're not saying Superman can't make mistakes. We're not Mark Wade, but Superman is but this leads to people thinking that Superman is evil the entire time. He just puts on an act because with the boys that's what they're doing.
yeah. And like I said, we want Clark and Diana flawed. They're
Mhm.
not perfect or anything like
They're
that,
not
but they
gods.
aren't right. But at the same time, they aren't going to um the only front I would say that's being put on is the whole secret identity.
Hmm.
And yes, Clark does exaggerate the galoot part, but they are still who they are. And that was the thing that was in um Justice League 13 or 14
Hmm.
when Clark explains to Diana, Superman doesn't wear a mask because he wants people to trust him and to
Yeah.
see his face. So who wears the mask is Clark because Clark being an ordinary guy, no one cares. So, having the glasses on and then it's just glasses. You can still see his face. So they aren't trying to be deceitful, in,
Hmm.
in that evil type way, like the boys or even Batman. Batman is even, sometimes very secretive, untrustworthy, and deceitful. He isn't. Bruce is a good person in to a certain extent. He
Yeah. A good
will.
person that has contingency plans to kill all of his best friends.
That's why I said to a certain extent.
That's why
He
Wonder
is
Bat
very.
doesn't work because right there he doesn't trust Diana, and for a romantic relationship, you need total trust. Batman
And
will
yeah,
never trust anyone. Maybe Selena and maybe the Bat family because he trained them, but no one with powers.
I mean, even Selena is a little. It all depends.
It depends on if she's being written by Tom King or not. There you go.
Funny.
So then we get to the next slide, which is the negative effect of this. Because again, it's like to a certain degree, Superman. I think that this regresses Superman's image of people saying that Superman's too good. He's too much of a goody two shoes, where you have guys like Homelander who are too bad. And this, or you have with the hero, I hesitate to use this word, hero butcher in the book. And I'm like, it makes people think that there can't be just good people in the world. That's the second and third order effects of this book. And that's why a too nihilistic look on superheroes like the boys ultimately falls apart.
Exactly. And Superman and Wonder Woman, they can, like I said, they can be flawed. And we had that with New 52. We had that with the Golden Age, is that he isn't a pushover. Um, and he basically bullies the bullies. He fights corruption. He is the OG social justice warrior. You know, and Diana is too. Diana, she does have the compassion. She's very innocent and pure-hearted. She, sometimes written to trust too easily. She is trying to rehabilitate her villains. But at the same time, she does, when written correctly, not as just the overbearing, uh, warrior type. She can have an attitude, she take no nonsense type thing. And Clark can be the same way. But you have to have that balance of, their personality. Everyone has this. I don't get how some writers write characters so robotic and one
Mhm.
dimensional when,
Like Tom King.
yes, when all you have to do is write them like real people. They
Yeah,
just,
again. I think part of it is because when you're writing, particularly DC, you're essentially writing gods, and they get caught up in the god nature of them. Which again, that's what Brit and I always do when we write these characters is we write them like they're us. By that we mean human beings. We don't mean necessarily that we
self-insertion.
self-insert
Right,
because we're not Tom King. What we
right,
do is because we're like, how would a regular person think about this? Because again, even in again Justice League 12, Brit and I reference that because it basically summarizes, really when you think about it, it's that those 2 pages summarize the entire how to write superheroes, because it's like we're not gods, we are just regular people trying to fit in a world that sees us as these gods.
right. Or again, if you want to put, realism, you are writing immigrants. You
An
put them
immigrant, a
in,
refugee, a woman.
yeah, it's very simple to write these characters as just normal people, just on a fantastical, you're just adding the fantastical elements. And yeah, that is how we write Shelterverse. We have where Diana, you know, loses her mom and her sisters, but put it on a grander scale that obviously it is the mascara. She's Hippolyta being the queen. That is um, a disaster as elevated as it was. The depression, the grief, and everything that Diana goes through. You know, what happens when a daughter loses her mother, or a sister loses her sisters. You know, you have examples of this in real life. So what we're doing is putting real life elements into these characters, and then, like I said, putting them on a fantastical, more elevated level. It's
Yeah,
that simple. It's
it's
not
not that
anything.
hard.
It's not that hard to write these characters. It's not that hard to make these characters. I don't like it when some people say that they need to be relatable, because the way that
They're not
some
Marvel.
fans,
Marvel does the relatable stuff.
right, and well, I would say that
Well,
Clark and
let me this way.
Diana,
They don't necessarily have to be the Marvel relatable, because here's the thing.
right,
When people say these characters have to be relatable, here's the thing. I'll never forget this. Nick and I were doing a stream one day, and someone said that, and we're like, okay, you're more of a Marvel reader, aren't you? And the person said, yeah. And I'm like, there you go. Because here's the thing
bingo.
about DC and Marvel. Marvel is essentially the average Joe with powers, or like scientifically enhanced or something like that. DC is the gods. You can't change one, because then they lose what's different than Marvel. And then this person responded with, DC does not have to be different than Marvel. And I go, oh wow, you just want DC to be Marvel, don't you?
Yeah, that. Mm-mm.
So by the way, Britt, I picked a book from my shelf because this is what we have to. This is where the boys and all this stuff comes from.
Mhm. Right.
That, because when because what people read with Watchmen, because people read Watchmen and got the wrong lessons from it. Because Watchmen is essentially, this is the rated G version of the boys. That's what
Yeah,
this
I
is,
would definitely.
because this is doing kind of the same thing. It's deconstructing superheroes, but the problem is people like Tom King and Garth Ennis, and took this as the blueprint on how to write all superheroes.
And what's so terrible is when, Tom King, like, the fact that he was able to write a prequel, whatever that was, and
Where
it's
he
like,
sent, by the way, did you know that when he was writing that, because the variant cover artist did a variant cover for Ethan Van Sciver, Tom King sent an internet mob after the person.
Yes, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. And yet he still has a job.
Honestly, he got an editor fired. You know, I guess the thing is with Tom King, when he first did the Kyle Rayner book, um, in New 52, and it was like the lowest selling DC book, but people were praising it. So it was kind of like it kept going, but it still was a low seller. Um,
He doesn't bring the sales that DC thinks he does.
right. So, but at first he was basically the critically acclaimed type thing. And having, like I said, writers and fans that loved his work. So he was able to get that sort of backing. Um, I mean, that was very deceitful, you know, um, because from those stories or books that he did in the 52 is even with Grayson to now it's kind of like that's a total different writer, you know. I mean, I would think that as years go by, your writing becomes more perfected and you become better. But it seems like Tom King, even Mark Waid, some of these writers that have written, for years, they are going backwards and their writing is very mediocre, is very showing how just they don't care for these characters. And in order for them to pretend that they care, they would rather, write them as a self-insertion.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. They're like, I can't write these characters unless they're like me. Well, then you shouldn't be writing comic book characters because, like this way, I say I would love to write Wonder Woman. I'm a straight male.
Thing
I'm
is,
not trying to change her.
right, and the thing is with writing Diana, no, it's not trying to change her to fit, a narrative that how Tom King is trying to do. It's not that. It's basically writing her as because you respect her and you care for her character. You understand the message, that she is understand the message and her purpose as a character.
Exactly. Because I fell in love with the character as she's written, not through some inner version of her, which I don't have, because I appreciate the actual version that's existed since the 40s. Anyway, continuing on, and it's the thing because of like books like The Boys and Watchmen, classic heroism is kind of out of fashion, but I would argue it's getting more back in. But for a long time, it was out of fashion because of stuff like The Boys, Injustice, and Watchmen.
Yeah, because I think that with the world,
Mm-hmm.
the world has never been um rainbows. It's never been that. So with I would say because of the political climate and just going through, COVID and everything that we've, dealt with as, the world just turning upside down. You want more traditional superheroes because that is their purpose. That is why they were created in the first place. Marston, his quote, it said, "Superman and Wonder Woman they were picture books, for children, so they can basically have this escape and they can have this happiness and this creative imagination, this positiveness to see these characters, flying and being happy and saving the day type thing. This is why they were created. Wonder Woman was created to fight and show this woman of strength that is equal to her male counterpart, which is Superman. She is to be, this symbol and this embodiment of strength of a woman, going through with the Amazons and what they went through. And but they, um rebuilt in Themyscira being a utopia, yeah, but it is very much women at peace.
Hmm.
Um, and for her character, Wonder Woman, to be that teacher for women. Yes, we do need more stories where Diana is dealing with um abusive situations for women and children, and how she wants to bring cultures together, or how she wants to be a teacher, to for literature and stuff like that. We do need other stories like that, but that is her purpose just overall. And then with Superman, he is supposed to fight for the everyday man, for the oppressed and everything like that. He is supposed to be, in a sense, an everyday man himself, on a, as Morrison said, a Paul Bunyan type level.
Hmm.
And yeah, so to get that back of how these characters were and the purpose of why they were created, it's kind of like, yeah, Sherlock,
Yeah,
because
because here's the thing: as screwed up as the world is, if anything, the screwed up nature of the world proves we need more classic superheroes to have something to aspire to be. Because if the superheroes are like Homelander or like us, what's the point of aspiration?
exactly. And also, it's just the fact of, you know, with the world being what it is, we just can't have the heroes like that. I mean,
Mm-mm.
with them being all sad and mopey, depressed and stuff like that, it's kind of like, and barely caring, feeling that it's a burden to be who they are, that kind of thing. No, we don't need that. We need some inspiration, whether it is from comic book characters, or it is from music or something like that. You just need that happiness back, and that is who these characters are supposed to be. The boys, obviously, whether it is the comic iteration or the live action adaptation, we don't need that. In Injustice, we don't need that. We don't need a
Exactly.
Superman who turns into a tyrant, because while yes, he did lose a, loved one or whatever, it's still the fact that it's a lot of men who loses a significant other, and women who, um I would say, if with having an unborn child, a miscarriage or a stillborn, or yeah, if a man does lose his wife and child in an accident or something like that, he does break down, and but he doesn't turn into a tyrant. He doesn't go murdering people. He doesn't go, he might need therapy, he might need something like that, need isolation or something, or but to show a grieving man, and who he's supposed to be as an inspiring hero, go so far off the deep end, and then to purposely, like, um forget that he wasn't just grieving Lois. He was supposed to, not only with her but also Metropolis, and
Hmm.
that's the same thing as
I
Kingdom
know.
Come. But so many people emphasize only on Lois. So, for
Hmm.
him, he's very selfish deep down. For him to just snap so easily, it really just shows that, again, you don't care for the character, and you are sending the wrong message out there.
And we will talk about Injustice more actually in depth in this. But anyway, so Britt, let's talk about what if Clark and Diana went to the boys' world. First off, Diana would be like, "Oh my god."
That is exactly why I chose that panel, because
Yeah.
they will be horrified. That
Yeah, they're
she
like,
would
"What
definitely
the
be
hell is
horrified.
this?"
Um, Clark would be, basically, he would tell Diana, if I ever became like Homelander, kick me all the way to Venus or something like that.
Well, at first, so the way I could imagine this is at first, with all the information on this slide, at first they show up and they're like, yeah, they're plastered everywhere, but so are we back home. So it's like, okay, it's not necessarily not yet. It's not necessarily like, I guess, bad. It's a little weird that like they have celebrity endorsements and stuff, but still.
Yeah, the thing is, with these, you have, we see it in comics how they have merchandise of people wearing their logos, of them having action figures, people dressed as, them um, during Halloween. But we've never seen, well, I've never seen it, and I don't think there ever has been, where Superman and Wonder Woman are being on commercials, or that they are endorsing, or either they are endorsing or being, endorsed by a corporate thing.
Mhm.
Superman's biggest, you know, number one villain is um, a corporate guy, Lex. So that is something that will definitely make them side eye a lot of things.
Mhm. Yeah. So then you get to then they get a little more information on the world.
Seeing that the people are very much in fear, that they are just basically letting it be, that some of the people, they do worship, Homelander, or when something is going, um like the first scene, or yeah, the preview of The Boys, when sh I don't know his character, but when his girlfriend is um killed by
Oh, you
the
mean
speedster.
Huey and Robin?
Yeah, when I think it was A Train,
A
when
Train
he,
runs right into her.
yeah, that to see that, and how the other bystanders or whatever, like,
Just
you
keep
know it
walking.
it's just kind of like that's the norm. No one is really just, they don't have any type of reaction. They aren't trying to help anyone. They aren't trying to get to safety. It's just, oh, whatever's happening is happening. They might, you know, may look at it, but it's just something so void, within this world, that really makes Clark and Diana, again, side eye. And it's kind of like, yeah, this is not the world that we want to be in. Sure, we will probably, of course, within them, they would want to help. But when you see that the people, don't want help, and they are just uh, content in, in that type of situation. And that's pretty much how, in reality, some people are, with in present day. They are very much content in some ways of just, if the world burns, it just burns. That's the type of situation that they see.
And then they see obviously the boys. I mean the seven not exactly being the pillars of morality, and Homelander straight up murdering people. So Superman's like, okay, that's enough. Dear, would you like to teach our American flag cape wearing friend some manners? And then Diana takes off her gauntlets.
Diana would definitely, like, first of all, the flag cape. Clark would definitely.
Oh, by the way, if this were a DC multiverse, Homelander is just an alternate version of Steve Trevor.
You know what? That is perfect. That is
Hmm.
that is wow.
And then Clark goes, "You have no idea how long I wanted to do this," and just punches him in the face.
Because he's imagining Steve.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly.
Wow. You know that hmm, that can honestly be a good story.
Yeah, and they take down the entire seven because they're Superman, Batman, and because they're Superman and Wonder Woman. They're powerful enough to do that, and they go, "You guys are in no way worthy of these powers." And they take down Vought, and then they create an antidote to the compound that gives them their powers, and basically strip this world of superheroes, heroes, if you will.
Yeah, you definitely have to keep. We are basically, saying that they're heroes in terms of
All
what
right,
they're supposed to
soups.
be.
That's the word they use. We're
Well,
just calling them
yeah,
soups.
but even that still just sounds so like they shouldn't even have that. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So they take them down and say, "You guys are you 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 guys see yourselves as gods, but you're anything but." Homelander, you have an obsession with yourself and your self-image, which and Diana says, admittedly, that is similar to the Olympian gods, but you are in no way a moral paragon that you think you are. And then he goes to like, "Oh, I got it." He goes to heat vision her, and then Clark heat visions into his eyes and
Oh, the
blinds
dark
him
side thing.
and blinds him.
Oh my God.
He goes, "Yeah, if I wanted to, I could go through your head, but I'm not you."
He wouldn't. Yeah, he wouldn't. I mean, he
Yeah,
should, but
no, he'll say, "Yeah, here's the difference between you and me. Yes, there are times when I want to punch a hole through Lex Luthor's chest, but I would never do that. I've punched a god of the sun many times, and it's hilarious, but I would never punch a hole through a human being. You're using your powers as some way just to make yourself feel good about yourself, and I'm sorry, that's not what being a superhero is about."
exactly.
And then they would strip themselves of the powers. Now, speaking of not being what superheroes are about, that was quite the injustice, eh, Brit?
Wow. That
It's so easy to transition. Here's the problem with the injustice story. Here's why the injustice story is like a sweater made by someone that's never made a sweater, because it's made just to justify the fighting game.
which honestly, and I've said this multiple times, NetherRealms is terrible with their female characters.
Well, not only that, Brit.
And
Here's the funny part about injustice. Have you noticed that all of the metahumans are on Superman's side? So again, they're treating it like if you have powers, you're automatically bad.
exactly. Is very much if you want to break it down, it's very xenophobic, you know?
Yeah, and by the way, we did an entire episode on injustice, so we're just gonna speed through this. But basically,
Right.
this is where you get the myth. Because honestly, I have no evidence of this, but I doubt that the boys would have become a show if Injustice had not existed. Because Injustice came out, and all of a sudden, evil Superman stories were cool now.
Yeah, it was definitely because of the video game. It was because especially when the comic came out, that and yeah, New 52, it comics became, this phenomenon. And again, um, and Injustice became this big phenomenon, especially like I said, with NetherRealms, and they had just got off the high of Mortal Kombat as well. So with doing a DC fighting game, yeah, that was in 2013, that was popular. So you had that, and people, biting off each other with ideas, because we obviously see now that so many people are creatively bankrupt, that they basically, rode that coattail of evil Superman, and thought that that was the thing to do, especially to get the interest of the character, but very misguided in that thought process. So yeah, you have injustice, and it was supposed to be just a video game. You know, when we see Mortal Kombat, it's like that's all it is. It's just a video game. They've had, you know, comic book tie-ins before, but no one took that seriously. It was only the video game lore. We've even had Mortal Kombat movies from, I believe, the late, early, mid to late 90s as
Yeah.
well. Again, no one took that seriously. Why did
No one
Injustice?
took no one took the most recent Mortal Kombat movie seriously either.
Right. So why did Injustice become this big thing that people, um, you know, take seriously and think the
Because
characters are
more
like that?
people care about the DC characters than they do about the Mortal Kombat characters.
That's true. And I will also just say that this came at a time where in reality the world just became more cynical and they, you know, really they gravitated and held on to these types of iterations
Yeah,
and
exactly.
adaptations.
Exactly. And the biggest harm that so this thing was a character assassination on a lot of DC characters, but Superman and Wonder Woman were the main ones. So we're going to start with Superman because everyone thinks now that Superman is this close to being a dictator. And I'm like, if he's this close, oh, real quick, I love Grant Morrison's reaction to Injustice, where they said, I've lost family members. I didn't try and become a dictator.
Right. And that's where he alluded to the implication, um, were they, excuse me, uh,
Mhm.
alluded to the implication that 5G was going to be that,
Yeah,
you know, losing Lois or anything like that, he would become a dictator.
exactly. And I'm like, this is the stupid. This is why when you look at Injustice, it's remarkable how much character damage that this has done. And honestly, this is why this and his treatment of Wonder Woman is why when people say this is why I publicly said on my show I don't want any more Injustice. I want to burn that universe to the ground because
Honestly,
of the destructive influence it has had on Superman and Wonder Woman. Because as we'll see with Wonder Woman, I'll give you a preview real quick because I'm not going to change slides yet, but still, it made her look like a seductress that's going to turn people evil.
yeah. And, you know, honestly, that will be pretty messed up if you get Injustice 3 or something like that, but you cancel the Wonder Woman solo game.
But Britt, here's the stupid part. So here's the thing. I enjoy the games for what they are. Comic storylines, not so much, but the games are pretty fun. Now, here's my big problem with 2. You've obviously watched all the cutscenes for 2, right?
Kind of, sort of.
So, have you watched the end of the game?
No.
All right, so this is how it goes. So Batman breaks Superman out, basically releases Superman because Brainiac's invading, and they're at that point. He can't beat him alone. So they make you think that Superman is gonna turn good at the end. Like it's legit. Like he sees the Justice League table, and you see a look in his eyes, and it's like they're working together again. Even Dr. Fate says it's so good to see you guys working together. And then they have the opportunity to either kill Brainiac or like use him to activate to like release all the cities because guess what? Metropolis is digitized by the ship. They literally repeat the beginning of the story.
Oh my God.
It,
That is,
it is these I, when I watched that, Britt, when I played that, literally audibly, I was like, oh, hell no. Because they make you think he's going to turn good. I think it would have been great if he turned good at the end. This is why, Britt, say what you want about the Injustice movie, but Wonder Woman saw through Superman's BS, and even Superman was like, what have I done?
yeah. And you know, the thing is, it's very much a double-edged sword or catch-22 because, with seeing that movie, first of all, it shouldn't have had an animated adaptation, in the
Mm-mm.
first place. However, the upside or twisted way of that is that people saw how dumb the injustice world is and
Mm-hmm.
how it's just with that movie, it made people, you know, basically really be turned off, and turn into they don't want injustice anything anymore. Even with the comic books, those prequels with prequels that Tom Taylor is so stuck on, on writing, even those they no one cared for them, and it has in a sense worn out its welcome of having the fans. You do have fans, that's stuck on it because of the video game or because they are still cynical about it or whatever. But overall, I think that a lot of fans, like you said, they want something more happy, and especially
Well,
because of
not
the
only
world.
that, they want the characters to act consistently because, again, the way that they behave in the movie is more consistent with the way the characters actually would behave. Because here's the thing, you know what's kind of funny? They're like, they cram 5 years of comics into one. No, it shows how long the Injustice storyline should have actually lasted.
That's true. And honestly, it's just to have this going on for years, and again, with Wonder Woman, you make it worse because her
Actually, you know what?
story
Wait. Good transition, Brit.
her story just does not make sense at all. She would be the one that would knock some sense out of Clark, from the get-go. So to
Well,
have her
it gets way worse, Brit. Way worse. In Injustice 2. Okay, so you may be wondering, where were the Titans in Injustice? Superman sent them to the Phantom Zone. So they get out. This is how stupid this story is. Wonder Woman sees Cassie. She's like, "Oh, Cassie, it's so good to see you." And then Cassie goes, "He threw us in the Phantom Zone." And then Wonder Woman goes, I didn't know." And then that's
you
the
know
only time that's ever referenced. She still worships Superman.
that is so dumb. Honestly, that was very much it, it was a last minute thing. That definitely sounds like a last minute thing of them
I'm like,
basically.
what the hell? I'm, I'm like, Taylor, brother, what are you doing?
And especially because that's even more so, that makes it even more so dumb because if you have a Cassie, then that means you have Donna,
Mm-hmm.
and you have all the time. That
I don't
that
think we've
means
ever
that
seen
they,
it. I don't think we've ever seen an Injustice, Donna.
well, you should have Donna. And honestly, if you just have the Titans, period, that means that they've gone about just their entire, character, uh, years basically of being the traditional superheroes. So how they turn so evil and everything like that at a drop of a dime, that makes no sense. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, only because if let's say if you want to go through post crisis or Kingdom Come, you know, again, this is a bizarro Kingdom Come where at least with Kingdom Come, you had the motivation was solid because the world turned against, Superman and thought he was outdated, thought, traditional type ways weren't effective and they went for Magog, and stuff like that. That makes sense for Clark to, basically say, screw humanity, I'm gonna live in isolation. But he still wasn't evil. Diana, she still did not give up. She only, you know, her turn was when she lost everything, when she and the thing, it wasn't about losing a man or anything like that. It was that her role was questioned, that she was stripped of her, her royalties, and was, you know, banished, from the island and stuff like that. She
Mhm.
lost so much. So it made sense for Kingdom Come characters of their misguided ways. Injustice just makes no sense whatsoever. The grief that Clark has, yes, he's going to have that grief, as any man would for losing a child and his wife. But to go on that, you know, to murder, kids and your friends and stuff like that. No, that just went way too far.
To murder Shazam. Yeah, exactly. To heat vision through his head. So then you have again. Okay, so let's start with Wonder Woman because I think that this really hurt because people think that. Well, actually, let's start with both because then again, people think that when you put Superman and Wonder Woman together in any way, it leads to this.
Which again doesn't make sense because we have Kingdom Come, we have even Frank Miller's, universe. We have um any other Elseworld that you pick up, it has Clark and Diana, with their kids or happily ever after. Except for Distant Fire, because that was
Mm-hmm.
just a tragic thing. But it's still Clark and Diana were together and they were still the heroes that they should be. In Justice, I wouldn't even say that they are a couple because it was Diana, trying to seduce
Because
Clark.
literally Injustice 2 is like Batman talks to is fighting Wonder Woman and he's basically having a conversation with her and he goes, I'm not the one that stoked Clark's like fear and grief. And then Diana replies with, man's world needed to be subjugated.
Yeah, that and the fact that they are turning her into this in the Amazons, it's
Mm-hmm.
just the total opposite of the Amazon teachings.
That's what I would say. Say what you want, guys, about the new 52, but it in no way, like, did as much damage to DC as Injustice did.
New 52 didn't do any damage like that at all.
If for one thing,
Even
it
with the
saved the company. But I'm just saying, if we're going off of the assumption that, let's say, Brit, that new 52 did damage. Let's do that just for, like, argument's sake. Nowhere near. It's like one gunshot wound as opposed to the machine gun to the face that was Injustice.
exactly.
Th-
I
This
mean,
is Swiss cheese face.
oh my gosh. I mean, even with Wonder Woman, the switch against Azzarello, yeah, some critiques are warranted, with the Amazons, the way the Amazons were portrayed and stuff like that. But Diana still at her core was still that fighter. She was younger, a little bit more feistier. She but she was still that happy, free butterfly type. Uh, she had that type of attitude. Um, the the line that really annoys me, and it's kind of like you can use your brains just for a little bit, is that when Diana says, "When I deal with my enemies, I deal with them." Honestly, and Jeff Johns, he actually addressed that, and it was like he was trying to make conflict, and obviously it was dropped, because it just didn't make any sense.
He drops so many plot points that they starts off. When I talk about Jessica Cruz later, trust me, I'll bring that up.
Yeah, so I mean that Honestly, that line should not be brought up again because it doesn't make sense with the context of Diana. Have we actually seen within the New 52 Diana killing her villains? No. So honestly,
I
you
mean,
should take that.
Firstborn.
Firstborn is different because it's he's a god, like, and you know,
That's true.
I
That's like the argument of Batman to shooting parademons.
yeah, I would say like demons and supernatural being it all depends. But those type of monster type things, oh yeah, you can kill it all day long.
Hmm.
But she has never killed her villains like well, Tom King might have her eat Mouse Man, but um any other villain she has, she is not going to murder them. She's not going to kill them. No.
Yeah,
And she
because
never did in New
here's how I
52.
know that. Here's how I know that. She didn't kill Cheetah
No, as
early
many
in the series, remember?
right. I mean, if anything, Diana says that she's too naive and that she's trying to care and maybe she cares too much. So again, the context there is is very much in your face. And I would think that fans would, have some type of logic, but they don't.
No, exactly. So then you continue and okay, so here's the problem with this. All right. So the issue here is that yeah, okay, so here's the thing. Superman reacts realistically in Injustice up until the point he murders the Joker. Well, actually, even beyond that, I think it's when he kills Oliver Queen or starts like saying we're going to execute prisoners in jail where I'm like, okay, bro, that in no way would really Superman act like this. And then the funny part, Brit, is how they bring up about how, oh yeah, Diana was always tempting him from the background and everything because she was trying to subjugate man. That wasn't even in the main comics.
Yeah, to try
She
to
even
blame,
regretted killing Kate Kane.
yeah, to try to put the blame all on Diana, that is very much, again,
I'm like, I'm gonna call BS on that, guys.
yeah, it's very much, uh, nether realms, and how they
Hmm.
treat female characters. They will blame the female,
Well,
you know.
and guess what? Did you know that the reason why Batman is the hero of Injustice is because is because Boone is a diehard Batman
Batman
fan?
fan. Yeah.
That's why. That's why he's not a fan of Superman or Wonder Woman.
Well, obviously.
Well, with Wonder Woman, he's made that abundantly clear. But it's like it's because it's what you can do. Because here's the problem: this storyline has potential. Because can you imagine a storyline where the same thing happens? Metropolis is new. Keep the tragedy part, but then you can make it a story of Clark turning to his friends, and you could see that you can make this a Justice League story about how much of a family they are, and each issue is each of the Justice Leaguers helping Clark mourn in their own way. Like you could have Hal create a construct of Lois so Clark can say goodbye and I'm sorry to her.
Aw, that is so sweet.
And you could have Diana say a prayer for Clark in front of the God of the Dead, and then she goes. You don't even have to do this romantically yet. You could have her go, Clark, you are not alone, and then she just hugs him, and then he breaks down on her shoulder, and that's what it is. So essentially, remember in Superman, Batman, Apocalypse, or the Supergirl book when like he unleashes the heat vision on Doomsday, and Wonder Woman has her hand on his shoulder.
Right.
His head is on her shoulder and he's like crying and she is just holding him.
Yeah.
And then
Something like that.
Bruce, and then all Bruce is like, dude, as someone that knows what it's like to lose parents, trust me, I will help you through this.
But you see, that was not going to
That's
lead
too
them
easy, right?
that was not going to lead them to mindlessly battle each other.
Yeah, that is because again, that's how you do the story, and it's almost like I just gave Brit a hint of something we could do. But
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what you
I
do.
got it.
That's what you do because that's what would happen in that storyline. Even the death of the Joker, because Batman would say, "Do I like that you killed? No, but it's the Joker. So before you kill anyone else that actually matters, I'm going to help you decompress and get through this."
That is a very good story.
Actually, wait. Here's what Bruce also does. He creates a dummy of like Doomsday and just says, "Okay, take out all your frustration, all your anger on this." And it's like essentially Brit. And I can say this because chapter 1 is on there. Remember in Shelter chapter 1 where Diana was fighting a dummy of Maxwell Lord?
Yes.
That.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do that because that way Clark gets all of his anger out, and then when he's finally tired, you can have it where like he's punching so hard his knuckles are actually bleeding, and then Clark and then Bruce goes, "Okay, but better," and then Clark turns to Bruce and just says, "Thank you."
Yeah.
That's how
I
you
like
do it.
Yeah, that is a good compromise from, having it just doesn't make sense with the story to be so contrived as it
Oh,
is.
and then later, issues down the line when Clark is finally recovering. And by the way, he doesn't do the identity reveal or anything like that. But so when he's recovering, this is when he and Diana are kind of playing with being together. But Diana doesn't want to think that he's only being with her as a replacement to Lois. She knows he wouldn't do that, but it's always like a fear in the back of her head. But finally, Clark says, "Look, this isn't about Lois. This is just about how I feel about you."
Such
Actually,
maturity.
no. Wait. He takes the lasso, wraps around his arm, and says, "This has nothing to do with Lois. This has something to do with the fact for the fact that I am in love with you."
Such maturity and growth.
Yeah,
Some
see, that's how you do that. And then you know what this is? This is what you do. Diana essentially, he does this in front of all the Amazons. And this convinced, because Hippolyta has heard what happened to Clark and she expected him to become the dictator. This is what convinces Hippolyta that there's hope in mankind.
So you're basically killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is
This way, you also undo the damage from that. That Wonder Woman issue still happens. The Wonder Woman prequel issue still happens. But what you do with this is that she sees like here is someone that is the most powerful man ever, and he didn't, and he had every reason to turn into a dictator and take over the world and subjugate it, but he didn't. He chose not to.
and that's very much in character.
Well, actually, no, wait. Hippolyta says he chose love over rage.
That is so sappy.
I
and
told you
sweet.
I'm getting my points, lady. I
That
told
is
you.
so,
Send me them
so
crying cat
sappy.
emojis, lady.
Stop. No, I refuse.
I'm gonna have to squeeze it out of her, aren't you? I'm gonna have to squeeze it out of you.
No.
But
That's not
essentially,
fair.
that's what it leads to. That's the way you do this. And then this honestly leads to, you could even have it where Bruce takes Clark to the Batcave and shows him that kryptonite that Clark had given him in case he ever turns evil. Bruce destroys the kryptonite in front of Clark and says, "I don't need this because this experience showed that I'm never going to need that." So you have this even leads Bruce to start to trust people again because he's like, "Clark, in some ways, I thought you were kind of naive, and I may have, and I somehow, in some ways, I bought the hope thing, but I didn't really believe it until now."
That is honestly, that is a lot of growth, even for, Bruce, for being so paranoid. And yeah, It gives
And then you
them
can have
both.
wait. And then you can have that's the thing where Bruce starts to let go of his anger for what happened to his parents. And then this is when he finally gets with Selena and says, I'm through being angry.
So does Nightwing die still?
Nope, no. Because injustice happens up until the Joker's death. That's where it stops.
You know, I would much rather have that.
Because he
You
doesn't
know,
even he dies in such a BS man. He falls on a rock. I'm like, what the hell, man? Nightwing?
again, it just shows how contrived this whole, story
Exactly.
is.
I'm like, what the? And this even makes Damian go, Father was right.
Yeah, it ruined Damien too a little bit. Damien
I
has
know.
over the year, Damien has gotten a little bit more um positive,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure if it's done right, you know,
Ooh.
um
So the
mhm.
way the way the story continues, that Superman becomes the face of people that have lost family members to tragedy.
So he has like
Becomes an
this,
advocate.
yeah,
He
and
creates the
probably
lowest.
creates
He
a,
creates the Lois Lane Foundation.
you know what, as much as you like can't stand her character, the fact that you were giving
This is the
so
organic way to do it.
yeah, the fact that you are giving her character so much agency and respect, in her,
Lord knows she doesn't
death.
get it in the book. Because here's the thing, that's what Clark would do. As much as I don't see, here's the difference between me and Tom King and Garth Ennis. I may not like Lois, but this
Or
is what
Tomasi.
Clark or Tomasi. I may not like Lois, I may loathe her, but this is what Clark would do in this scenario.
And that is what makes you
Ooh,
such a mhm.
and when Diana is pregnant with their first child, Clark says, I can't wait to see our baby. And then Diana says, and for the record, I love your son as well.
Aw.
Yeah, they go. See, I'm trying to squeeze those crying cat emojis out of you. It's not working. I will get you, Brit. But that's what you do. That's how you turn this story of tragedy into a story of hope.
Yeah. I mean,
See, this is how you deconstruct a hero and build them back up.
right. It's very much, I just would rather not have a fighting game like that. The versus DC versus DC. You can have
How about just
a
have it
fighting game.
where it's the Justice League versus the Legion of Doom? There's your fighting game.
Yeah, but the superheroes versus the superheroes, unless one of them is possessed, and most likely it would be Superman. But that is the only way to make this work. But to just turn them upside down and basically they are a mirror of their worst selves, that just doesn't work. And you need to be careful with like I said, the generation of today, very influenced by what they see on the internet, and it's it could be a total lie. And but because it is there and they don't do any type of research to confirm, you know, whatever it may be, they just go about and believing it. And so
Exactly.
it just
It's Twitter.
it just continues on, like with New 52, the constant, you know um revision of New 52 is ridiculous. And the fact that they believe a negative tweet will spread like wildfire, but any positive tweet, anything that actually gives you facts, they will purposely ignore it. You know, when have we seen any DC fan, hardcore DC fan, bring up the documentary?
Only to talk about how it completely skipped over DC Rebirth.
Yeah,
I
but
saw
uh,
that. Britt, I say this again. When I was watching that documentary and it was basically praising the new 52, I was waiting for the shoe to drop. I was like, here we go. And then when it skips Rebirth, I'm like, did I hit fast forward by accident?
Right. You know,
I was like,
but
there's no way. There's no way I could get this lucky.
right. But no, they don't. They don't like listening or hearing, knowing any type of facts. They would rather have lies as long as it, pushes the narrative that they feel comfortable with. And that is what, you know, DC basically is at fault with that too, because they fuel that. They continue to hide behind smoking mirrors with, look at their sales right now.
Mm-hmm.
They, with the status quo that they're pushing, you are right back in the same position that caused you to have the reboot in the first place. You are bringing back things that fans may act like they care for and uh supposedly ask for or anything like that on Twitter, but this once you bring it back and you see that first issue debut ranking or numbers, or you see how they have All In, or even with Rebirth, Rebirth pretty much died out within the first 6 months because, first of all, and even the deal explained it. He said Rebirth looked good on paper, but first of all, it was backed by initiatives. You had the
And you were
double
double
shipping.
shipping, not only, yeah, exactly. But the problem with a problem with Rebirth also is that Jeff Johns kept getting delayed doing Doomsday Clock. But besides that, it's like you're bringing back all the continuity that made everything that made the reboot necessary. And
Necessary.
Dio said this himself, and I'm like, are you kidding me? But anyway, so before we move on to the next slide, I got one more point to bring onto the story. The ending.
Okay.
Superman does the press conference that he did in Injustice, except this time he says, if there's one thing this experience proved, this is the reason why we have a Justice League. Not necessarily to fight threats. Because yes, we can do that all the live long day, but to help one of our own in their time of need. And then he finally says, if there's one person that I wouldn't have made it through this experience unscathed, if there's one person that I owe my getting through this on, it's of Diana of Themyscira. So we turn the story that was a hit piece on Wonder Woman to a tribute to Wonder Woman.
So sappy. Oh my God.
Exactly. My entire story thing is gonna be turned into like tributes to Wonder Woman. Because Lord knows she
Yeah.
needs it. Speaking of Wonder Woman, yeah, so this thing made Wonder Woman into like a tyrant, and that's the thing. That is ultimately not Wonder Woman. Here's the thing. That's not even this Wonder Woman, because for two reasons. Okay, so in the comics, Wonder Woman, she still, the problem with this is that they make it seem in Injustice 2, the game, that Wonder Woman was trying to use Superman to subjugate humanity. Not once is that ever indicated in the original comics. Number one. Number two, with their origin issue that's supposed to show why Wonder Woman became evil, this is the problem. Then you get to it's like she all of a sudden doesn't trust men because of what happened with Steve, but then she serves on the JSA and the JLA, and she has called these the best people she has ever known.
Yeah.
So why do you still not trust men?
Yeah. That.
Because one dude turned out to be a good fan of the, at the time, Chancellor of Germany. All of a sudden, you're like, all men are bad.
Yeah.
When you act, again, it's made by a sweat. It's a sweater made by someone that's never made a sweater. It's a sweater made by someone. It's a sweater knitted by someone
Knitted.
that has no hands.
Yeah. It
That's how
is.
crappy this is.
It's awful, and the fact that you could easily turn this around and make it make sense,
I just did an entire story where it actually turned Injustice into what realistic would happen. Not the arthritis sweater that was Injustice. That's what I'm calling it now.
Yeah, it I mean, and you can even say injustice just it's more so as we, write um Shelterverse and just and our whole Shelter multiverse. The core is to challenge Clark and Diana, yeah, morally, but at the same time and spiritually as well. And we put them in situations, um, that as a challenge that. But we want to stay in character. Yes, they aren't Mary Sue's, they aren't flawless. We definitely, want to push their flaws to the forefront. But we make them still recognizable and you want to root for them. You want to care for them. You want to love them. If they were real, you want to hug them, you know.
Hmm.
But what Injustice did is you feared a character like Superman and Wonder Woman. You just forget again their purpose. And the more we dissect injustice, as you said, that the superpower beings were on Superman's side, and that was if you are superpowered, you're evil, and how that goes into you know um what we've talked about with the whole xenophobic type thing and how powers, they weren't corrupt or anything. Being different it shows um it plays into this being different is bad, you know, and Batman being this supposed underdog, but yet he's basically the most powerful and this uh the most elevated power fantasy, in the universe, in the DC universe. So yeah, it's a lot to dissect and, like you said, pick apart. And yeah, you're definitely gonna have a Swiss cheese looking sweater when you
It's just
finish
going to be a bundle
analyzing
of
all this.
yarn. That's what's going to
Yeah,
turn into. It's going to be a bundle of yarn. So to counter this, it's kind of funny. I literally just did a story on countering this. So that's literally what this is. Or like do story. You can have them struggle. To be clear, Brit and I are not against. Like we've said many times, we're not against Superman and Wonder Woman struggling. The difference is when the struggling leads them to injustice.
stupidity.
It's an injustice what has been done to these characters. There you go. But it's essentially you can't. They have to stop making these characters push toward evil because that's not what would happen in these scenarios.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, the audience, you have to be careful, because the way the audience sees Wonder Woman now, and then the fact that we don't have the content for her, as we should, more positive content. So that's all they have to go by is,
Except I will
her.
say, here's the thing, Britt. Here's what I noticed when I was watching Batman Ninja 2, and we'll talk about this when we get there more. Have you noticed that whenever they adapt, say what you will about DC disrespecting Wonder Woman, but whenever we have a disrespectful portrayal of the Justice League, Wonder Woman is always the one that is respected?
That is kind of true. The only iteration where she's disrespected is Injustice, you know?
Yeah, besides that, but when you look at like Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, everyone agrees Wonder Woman was the best one. And Ninja, oh my
Yeah,
god. We'll talk about that when we get there, but for the love of mother of God, that was gorgeous.
yeah. And I appreciate that. Any content that has Diana in a more positive light, even if she is swayed in a way, as long as she learns, from that and gravitates towards, the Wonder Woman that she's supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get other evil Superman things like Omni-Man. Now here's the thing. Okay, so Britt, how familiar are you with the whole story of Invincible?
No, just with the animation. I have seen some comic panels and pages of, as far as Mark and Eve, having their children and stuff like that. But to actually do a deep dive of reading Invincible, no, I haven't done that.
Luckily for you, I have. So
That is a wow.
this contains 48 issues. So here's what happens with Omni-Man. Here's what they did to him. What they should have done in Injustice to Superman. He gets redeemed. He starts off as the evil Superman that you'd expect, and
Right.
then he fights Mark like in season 1 of the show, and then that kind of snaps him out of it, and then he flees, and then eventually what happens is, and he has the scene. So when Omni-Man eventually dies, he essentially tells his son Mark, "Thank you for redeeming me." Because with Mark, he finally starts being a hero again because he snapped out of it and he goes, "I thought I could block out I wasn't supposed to form an attachment to the earth, to your mother, to you, but I'm sorry you showed me that I am already attached to this world."
Wow.
See, this is why I say in the beginning of the show, Invincible is essentially a similar concept to The Boys, but done by someone that loves superheroes.
Yeah. I mean, I do kind of have issues with the female characters a little bit,
A little
but
bit. There are some parts of it, particularly in the comics, where I'm like, eh. But in terms of particularly Omni-Man, I'm like, wow.
yeah.
Again,
I mean,
that's what Justice Superman should have been.
the first season of Invincible, okay, so when uh Omni-Man goes off the deep end and stuff like that, that was a bit of a, oh my gosh, this is another The Boys type thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that Invincible is a little bit more, is better to digest than
Yeah. It's still bloody, but no, Britt. When we're done here, I will tell you some parts of The Boys that I couldn't talk about on here, and yeah, you will become the biggest Invincible fan because of that.
yeah, I would say that the it is gory,
Mm-hmm.
Invincible, the fights is, they definitely try to put in realism, and what Mark went through with Anissa,
Oh yeah, I'm wondering how are they gonna do that in the show?
yeah,
Or
that was a little bit off. And like I said, some of the female characters, Eve, and the relationships, the cheating, and just
Mhm.
that different back and forth drama. I love drama. We Shelterverse is definitely drama
Mhm.
filled, but and it's definitely giving a soap opera. However, it's just what some writers need to be careful with and move away from is always having the female character, like whether it's being the temptress or she's for man pain, or she, in order for you to feel sympathetic for the male protagonist, the female main lead, or one of, she has to be like the villain. She has to be the ultimate villain, and that is how Wonder Woman is treated in Injustice. Is that everything that happens in Injustice is because of Wonder Woman, and it's kind of like, no, how did we shift from the Joker to everything being because of Wonder Woman. That just really rubs me the wrong way. So with Invincible, it's kind of the same thing, with the whole back and forth of fans with Amber and then Eve now becoming like a crutch and stuff like that. Debbie, she is like a Lois, where the only reason why um Omni-Man became a little bit soft or whatever was, yeah, he got attached to a, mortal woman, married her, had a kid, but
Here's the
that
difference,
shouldn't be.
though. Here's with Omni-Man. I'm gonna push back on that, Brit. Omni-Man did not have Clark's upbringing. He was not raised on Earth.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I was gonna say, is that
Okay.
that's the different circumstances, is that, you know, this makes sense for him.
hmm
But to try to force that on Clark is a total different thing.
Okay, I see. I see. Yeah, because I'm like, because the reason why the lowest thing doesn't work with Clark is it ignores the Kents.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
completely. That's kind of important. I'm so glad Charles Sewell brought that up in Superman and Wonder Woman when Batman tells him you were raised on Earth. It's almost he probably wasn't, but I like to think in my own headcanon that was Charles Sewell saying, "See, Lois does not automatically make him human."
I mean, you never know, because Sue was, threatened by Chloe's fans. So yeah, he could
Yeah,
have,
maybe he was like,
put a
"Ah,
little
screw you,
shade.
bye." But
Yeah.
speaking, so this was one of the coolest parts of the new 52 Superman for us is what they did to Krypton, because there were whole issues of like Superman action comics that were just on Krypton, and then you have like Lara was a general and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is great stuff.
Yeah, with her being a general, a warrior, and being equal to Jarrell. A lot of iterations of Laura, she's always mute, and she's just crying on Jarrell's shoulder when they are about to send Cal off. But Man of Steel and New 52 really gave Laura a character. And now we're back to the mute, that the only thing that Mark Wade even does is he has her holding baby Cal, or saying that her smile reminds him of Lois, which is weird.
Or
But
like again, John Burns, Lara, which I'm like, she's not even a character; she's an accessory.
yeah, so for New 52 to give Laura, her own identity, and make her, especially the secret origins, when you have Martha's point of view and Laura, it really shows them, like I said, giving them character and depth, and makes it that Superman's story isn't just about father figures or fathers, male dominated. It The mothers are equally important to him.
hmm Exactly, and again, when you have like compare new 52 Lara actually does stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay. And by the way, if you guys want to know how are you guys gonna do Lara and Jor-El for the Shelterverse, just look at this.
Yeah.
that's
Mm,
that's pretty much that, because it's
yeah.
like these were the ideal versions. We may even see some fun interactions between Wonder Woman and Lara, because again, this is a universe where Superman and Wonder Woman, spoiler alert, get married. I think that's an inevitability if we're writing a story, right?
Right. The thing is, that was the one thing I would say is a was a missed opportunity. If Clark could like go back in time, or have a story like that of Clark and Diana having a very, twisted type of adventure, of them going back in time together and seeing young Jarrell and Laura, and meeting or something like that. That would have been something, because Laura and Diana having um that in common as warrior women, and wanting to be equal to their, to their partner. That would really, I would say, speak more to the character growth that Laura, received. Yes, she has regressed, and that is kind of like, again, on the bankruptcy that DC has and writers have, and thinking that Superman's, story should just be of, the father point of view. I mean, even Martha, she doesn't really have that much of a view anymore, um, that she should, you know.
Hmm.
But yeah, for our Krypton and just um, Krypton in general, New 52 really gave Krypton more depth, even more depth than Metropolis, really.
Yeah, and I like how we're seeing more of that with Absolute. By the way, how cool is it that apparently the L's came to Earth together?
You know, if that is that
Because
the
if you
L's are,
notice, when you look at the picture in the back, in the foreground, there's a picture of all three of them together on Earth.
I'll have to look at that a little bit more. If that is the case, that would be quite interesting.
That would be, I'd be like, oh, dude, that is like the Kents are the L's, and I'm like, you actually have something really interesting there, Jason Aaron. So anyway, so then I know it's as soon as I saw as soon as I read the Viltrum Wars event for Invincible, I was like, oh, Brit's gonna hate this because it's like because the Viltrumites are the Kryptonians. And the problem is, while Omni-Man gets redemption, Viltrum does not.
I
Some do.
hate,
Some of them do, but still.
I hate, hate the way Krypton is villainized. It just it
Mhm. Or you mean like My Adventures with Superman?
yes, to make them into conquerors. They were not conquerors. If anything, they wanted to be left alone. Jarrell was the one that was he was the one that wanted to explore, more beyond. He wanted to bring, just honestly, like Diana, wanting to bring cultures together. So he wanted to bring worlds together to make more advancements, you know, and just they felt like their world was, like I said, advanced and it must be protected. But and what they had was very valuable, but that's what caused their own, destruction with being so selfish. And but they weren't, again, conquerors. They didn't care to make other, you know, um earths, I mean, planets feel inferior to them. Now, granted, some Kryptonians might have, like Zod or something like that, but mostly no. Krypton was not like that. Krypton just was being its own world. And the fact that um and honestly, the only issue it was with having, the babies were basically like test tube babies. And Cal was the first out of 1,000 years, being the first natural born to, of
Hmm.
course, obviously to make him unique. But that, honestly, even that's just one of their flaws. And it's an innocent flaw, I would say, because it's nothing like the whole conquering and murdering and stuff like that. No, they weren't like that. So for post crisis to make Krypton like this and very like uncultured, when they should be, honestly, Krypton feels like it should be multicultural in a sense, as the mascara, but to make it so that it's desolate and cold and stuff like that, and uh, all of that, it just, again, you are going within that whole line of xenophobia and um borderline, or going over that line of racism, and um not truly understanding the importance of culture, and embracing and honoring one's culture.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you get to Omni-Man versus Superman. The thing is, again, is like then he does get like a redemption, but first off, the whole argument by Kirkman, by Robert Kirkman, the inventor of Omni-Man, that Omni-Man would beat Superman, and I'm like, sorry, bro. I know you want to protect your creation, but no, no,
I
no, no,
think,
no, no, no.
honestly, I think that, of course, when Omni-Man kills um the Justice League stand-ins, you would think so, but
Yeah, but when you see his actual powers, I'm like, no, because all he has is strength and flying. He doesn't even have heat vision.
yeah, even with being the strategist that she is, even Diana could probably take on
Oh, Diana would
Omni-Man.
murder Omni-Man.
Yeah,
Murder.
yeah.
Because
So
here's the thing, Diana is the one superhero that I think, given the opportunity, would beat Superman.
she would, because she is a strategist,
She's a
and
strategist and she's a warrior. And of the two, she is more willing to go all the way if she needs to.
yeah. And, I mean, honestly, Diana, even with a Clark that is at full power, Diana can still beat him because,
Exactly.
okay, the thing is, the whole thing with, Cal being a rival of power within the gods, it it means that basically he's not at the level of the gods. But Diana is blessed by the gods, meaning her power is essentially the same. The fact that she is blessed by multiple gods too, she has this abundance of power that I think DC, obviously being a woman that powerful, they are intimidated by and scared of. So we
Very
would never,
threatened.
yeah, we would never actually get that. But the fact that she is immortal, that she is a strategist, and that she is that warrior, that she's powerful. She doesn't have to have the heat vision. She can, like she did in issue, what was that, 5, when she was taking on Zod and Fiora. You know,
Hmm.
she,
Took them both on, mind you.
yeah, she can do so. So, for DC to try to downplay her strength and everything, and no, we're not power scaling or anything like that. It's just logistics, basically.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
what's on the pages. So it's not like you have to really with that.
Diana can beat Clark even when he is at his most powerful. She should be able to be on that level as well. I mean, Batman doesn't even have a contingency plan for her. Her contingency plan is Cal. And even that is kind of like, we just hope that, you can beat her.
Yeah,
Or whether you beat her or you can talk her down or something. But
exactly.
for you not to be able to have a Batman to not be able to have a contingency plan for her, that shows how powerful she is. And the fact that DC downplays that is
Well,
just such. Mhm.
have you read Tower of Babel, Brit?
I have not read fully, but I
Because
have seen. And
he because Batman does have one. What it is he implants a device in her ear that puts her in like a virtual simulation where she fights an enemy she cannot beat. And the idea is she will fight until her heart gives out.
right, I have heard of that, and it's kind of like,
That's
well,
realistic.
I was like, well, that makes sense, you know, but
Hmm.
it it makes sense, and that's something that's very logical for Diana. She will continue fighting until, you know, her heart gives out. That is true. And, that is something that is the only contingency plan and the only thing that I will take.
Exactly.
Anything else, no.
So then we get to the most contrived of the evil Superman. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Brightburn. So I rewatched this movie. So
Hmm.
basically what it is what if Superman crashed but really became a serial killer? And the problem with this movie, okay, is that basically what this is like everyone's a dick to this one kid and then he becomes superpowers, and apparently in this another Krypton is evil because he's sent there to take the world.
Yeah.
That's what the ship. So have you seen this movie, Britt?
I have.
Yeah. So when he says take the world, I'm just like, oh God. It's like when I was watching it because I rewatched this like earlier this week to prep for this episode. But
Hmm.
when I was watching it, I remember this doesn't hold up to me as well as it did. And I'm like, by the way, the whole myth that James Gunn was attached to this movie, he was, but in name only. That was just done because his brothers made this movie and they wanted studios to finance it.
Oh, wow.
So when people say, "Oh, here's how he kind of gets Superman," he did Brightburn. I'm like, no, he didn't.
Wow. Well, I did not know that.
Yeah, and so again, I'm watching this and I'm like, this is one of the. I'm like, what the hell is happening?
I mean, with even being raised by a Martha stand-in, he still is evil.
Well, Britt, because he hasn't met Lois yet.
I mean, that is just ridiculous.
And he turns into a stalker of the. This entire thing is like one. I get what they were going for, and it could have worked, but the way they played it off, I'm like, what the hell
Yeah.
is this?
Yeah. Just
And
think
then
that
it gets
when
worse. And then the post-credit scene, they hint at the evil superheroes, and it's just an advertisement, by the way, for James Gunn's Super. And then like you have the Aquaman thing, and then you have the Alex Jones guy is outlaying. There's a witch woman that chokes people with ropes.
and the fact that she's doing the Wonder Woman pose too
Mm-hmm.
with
Oh, there's also a Spider-Man apparently.
yeah. And there's an aqua person too. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would have been interesting to see, what this would be. Um, Basically the Justice League turns into monsters type thing.
Mm-hmm.
If it was done correctly, that would have been something
Earth
entertaining, and
three.
yeah, basically Earth 3, and something that could have been, when executed right, it could have been, something that's just not so much as within, pop culture, or, that's just billion-dollar franchise, not something like that. It's very much, it will probably be a cult classic,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
But
Um,
this is one of the IPs that I'm really glad we never got a sequel to.
yeah, I mean, to see a witch woman, I don't know. I'm kind of
And before you say
curious.
Absolute Wonder Woman, this is not Absolute Wonder Woman is tasteful.
No, she's not strangling anyone with the lasso. She's not doing
Mm-mm.
that.
She's not Injustice Wonder Woman.
Right. It's nothing like that. Honestly, she is New 52 because of the aesthetic of her costume,
Mm-hmm.
just turned into a witch. It, you
Exactly.
know,
So, Britt, the last evil Superman we're going to talk about, this is going to infuriate you. How familiar are you with the Eternals?
Not at all. I just saw the movie.
So, in the comics, Ikaris is in no way evil.
Of course. Of course.
Literally, they changed it to make him evil Superman. He is the leader of the Eternals.
think I did not like, and here's the thing about evil Superman that you know the the constant is that they become obsessed with their love interests, and that is basically their
He
tipping
was here.
point. Yeah, and that becomes their tipping point. That is the catalyst. In everything is that they are obsessed and become stalkers or whatever, or you know, with love interest. And I just don't. That is not something that you should romanticize at all. It's worse when they romanticize it with Chloe, because you have it where other, potential relationships are crapped on. Then you have Lois without agency. And then you have Clark, that he's emotionally unstable. He is emotionally fragile, and that acting like a galoot, or it gets old and tiring. And then romanticizing that golden age where fans say, oh, they have this height difference, and then Lois is supposed to be jumping off of buildings or stuff so Superman can catch her. He likes to be, um, you know, Captain Save a Thought. He likes being like that. He likes to feel needed. And also with Lois, the fact that, like you said, that's your biggest argument of Clovis, is that that at the end of the day, she's going to get saved. Like, there's no,
It annoys the crap out of me when people say that Super Wonder has no stakes, but they point to Clois.
yeah. And the fact that, and I spoke to Jid about this too, how a lot of things that are projected on Super Wonder, it actually happens with the traditional relationships, and how, the whole eugenics thing, and um, with Lois having powers now, how that is being praised when she's nothing more than a gender bent Clark, or trying to make her Diana Light, but she's still not Clark's equal. And you also have where, um, when they say Clark is a sun god and he fell in love with a storyteller. First of all, a storyteller, you could think that she's a liar. And second, that whole fake poetic type thing, you are referencing Clark as a god. So, which is it? When he's with Diana, they say they don't want to be referenced as gods, no matter, even if it is some type of, spiritual, poetic type thing, it can be referenced that way. But to just try to force that godhood on them, they don't want that. So for Chloe's fans to say that he is a sun god and praise that, and to say that he is only good, or um, he's basically not space Zeus because he's with Lois, that doesn't make the character look good at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It makes Superman look like super simp. That's essentially what he is, or Captain Save a Thought, as you say. I just love the way Brit phrases stuff. So it's always
Thank you,
hilarious.
thank you.
It's always hilarious. But yeah, that's what annoyed the crap out of me, because what's kind of funny. So I read the comics for Eternals after seeing the movie, and then I read
Hmm.
this and I'm like, this is nothing like the movie.
Yeah, and Ikaris was definitely a simp here. I mean,
And he's
she,
not that in the comics. In no way is he that.
yeah, just his whole motivation was basically like he was too obsessed, he was too loyal, and then, becoming a stalker and just throwing a tantrum because he wasn't with, oh, I want to say the actress's name. I don't know the character name.
Cersei,
Yeah.
ironically.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it really just, uh yeah, it wasn't good. And again, with the whole popularity or the boom of evil Superman, and because it was so constant, people got tired of it. And honestly, was it too late or is it too late? Not really, but I don't want an overcorrection. And that's my one of my biggest things about James Gunn's Superman is because I feel like it's going to be an overcorrection, and you're either going to have where you do have Superman fans that are kind of soft, or well, no, not kind of. They are very soft, and it's kind of like Clark can't have any flaws. He has to. You have to know that he has to have, a happy ending.
Mark, wait.
Exactly, and that just I don't know. I can't invest in a character that way. You know, even if when we're doing the Shelterverse, yes, we are gonna have happy endings and stuff like that, but the way we, you know, coordinate the story and what they go through though, it's kind of like at that point, yeah, they deserve a happy ending. We don't just make them have these certain dilemmas an easy fix and then they have a happy ending. No, it's dilemmas. They go through hell, probably stay in hell for a couple of, for some time, and then they'll fight their way through it. They'll learn a lesson, but you can feel the aftermath of it.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's still
Well, as Tomasi has said, no drama, no story.
but the way he used it was
Whoa, yeah.
totally
Or the
out
way
of
we use it, it's called okay. There's this magical word, and it's something that he obviously has no concept of. It's called organic.
exactly,
Can you say
exactly,
can you say organic? Organic. That's the word. That's the word. I feel like I'm Mr. Rogers
exactly,
now. Because what
exactly.
we is it's all based on the service of the story and what's already established. Tomasi's organic is I'm gonna ignore literally what was written earlier in the series. But anyway, I could get onto a rant about that, but so that's the problem with the evil Superman and Wonder Woman is ultimately it's a misunderstanding of because here's the thing. Yes, it's an alternate take on the characters and its Elseworlds and stuff, but some people don't know that.
Right. And again,
That's the issue.
if you have a lot, endless amount of content with Batman, you know. So those different iterations with Batman, you can you can basically look at them and be like, okay, yeah, we know it's tons of iterations. But Superman, he's only well, now, they are reducing him to just this post-crisis version that happy-go-lucky, or even they want to keep him in this Donner type, you know, um, mindset or era as well, you know. So
Exactly.
we don't really have that multitude of iterations that to invest in, except for Absolute, which Absolute is just starting, so we
I
don't
have an
really
entire
know.
slide on Absolute, Brit. I have an entire slide on Absolute. Trust me, there's a reason why there's a reason why I put Absolute Wonder Woman in this.
Okay. Um.
So just
So
bear with me on that point.
okay. So we have that, but and then Wonder Woman, of course, we if we don't have much of Superman, we definitely, at the bottom barrel with Wonder Woman.
It's like
So
Superman, Wonder Woman.
yeah, and so with that said, because we have a little content and the content that give out, when it has that negative image of the characters, like Tom King's Wonder Woman, we, if not for absolute Wonder Woman, to know that we were only going to have Tom King's Wonder Woman is just like, is awful, you know.
Exactly.
And
So, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, and for them to cancel the video game when that would have been another iteration for the character to, basically a cleanse of her image, the, the from 1984. She definitely needs that. And now we're stuck with a writer who is obsessed with 1984.
Oh God, yes. So then we also get, all right, they're defined by their upbringing, not just their powers. Here's why. Actually, it'll be brought up in the next thing, because again, as Batman tells Superman in Superman Wonder Woman, he basically says verbatim, "All right, Clark, there's a reason why I've always trusted you and always worked with you, even before the League, even though you could probably punch the moon to dust." And then Superman goes, "Because I never punched the moon to dust." And then Batman says, "No, the reason why is because as far as you know, you were raised human. You just happen to have these fantastical powers. As far as you are concerned, you will always consider mankind your home team. It's because you were raised human. Up until a certain point in your life, you thought you were a regular human being." And that's what people don't get when they say he turns into evil Superman without Lois, because they forget the fact that he was literally raised human for, like, I'd say 15 years of his life. Let's say he got his powers at 15. In the formative years of his life, he essentially was human.
And also, let's not forget that pre-crisis, or now what Mark Waid is doing, he was also Superboy. So he had adventures of Superboy when he discovered the powers, he, loved them, and let's say became Superboy in high school or so.
And not
So
only that,
he's
Brit,
been,
there's a magical thing. Are you ready?
mhm,
He was Superman before he met Lois.
yeah.
Even in
So
Byrne's crappy origin story.
Yeah. So not only do you have Adventures of Superboy when he was still in high school, but he also, of course, transitioned to be Superman, and that was all before he met Lois. Within what, uh, so about 10 years before,
Mm-hmm. Roughly, yeah.
So yeah, that even more so puts the emphasis that Lois is not needed. If he was already a superhero 10 years prior to meeting her.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like the whole point about how she is part and parcel of the Superman journey is just objectively false. So this is what. So now we're going to talk about absolute. This is why I wanted to hold off on that point, because when I was making the slides for this, you literally set it up for me, Britt, without setting it up for me, and I was like, okay. So nature versus nurture, because here's what's genius about the absolute universe. Literally, this is a scenario where they should not be acting the way they do. What I mean by that is Wonder Woman should not still be acting like Wonder Woman. Superman should not be still acting like Superman. Wonder Woman's raised in hell. Superman's on the run. He doesn't have a support network. Neither does she. But they're still inherently good. You can put these superheroes in very bad situations, but they'll still come out on top.
That's kind of hilarious that, and I don't know
So,
if
so
it's
in a way,
deja vu.
real quick, the absolute universe is the anti-boys boys.
That's true. And I don't know if that's deja vu, but I did think of Absolute. And honestly, I'm not surprised that you did, have Absolute mentioned here, because it's true. Wonder Woman raised in hell. She should be um evil, you
Everyone
know.
thought she was going to be Kratos.
Yeah, she should be. But the fact that Kelly Thompson said that she could not make that work, like, n- no
Inherently,
matter
that wouldn't happen. It's like even in the first issue as a baby, Cersei describes Cersei, her greatest villain in the main universe, describes about how Diana softened her. And you start to see the cave turns from a cave into a home.
right, because that no matter the environment Diana is in, at her core, she is still very compassionate and loving. And that's
That
what
right
Kelly,
there is why I'm sorry, Brad, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that
no,
is
you good.
why I will always defend Absolute Wonder Woman because that 100% got this is Wonder Woman to her core. I don't know why it's only in a alternate hell universe, but I'll take it. At least some Wonder Woman content is great. And you know what, Brit? There's a reason why it's always in the top 5.
Yeah, because I mean, you would think that her main, you know, line book would show, and especially if a writer is saying, I'm going to show you how awesome she is. You know, you would think that we would see how awesome she is
If
with her
anything,
love and compassion.
Kelly Thompson is doing a better job of showing us why Wonder Woman's awesome.
Right. You know, and that's what Thompson said is basically trying to make her Kratos a war god, a war goddess, and all of that. She couldn't make it work because that just wasn't Diana, and it wasn't like you're just creating a total different character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true that if you try to make Diana this warrior, cold-hearted warrior woman, it's not her. You know, it is a total different character. Um, and she said she was going to give up because she just could not make that contrivance of
Mm-hmm.
making Diana evil um work. And even if Absolute Wonder Woman does have like this streak about herself, maybe she is a little bit more serious, she still has this glowy, I saw the preview of, I think it was it six? Yeah. And well, it was a black and white image. My bad. It's not six, it's eight actually. And Diana is surrounded by animals. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like even
You
when
even got
she's
that?
even if she is was raised in hell, she still gives that Disney princess vibe. And that really contrasts, it is such a good balance and such a contrast from her, like I said, being raised in hell and, this witchy type character to her being this loving Disney princess type character,
Well,
and
and not only that, Britt. What sold me when she's fighting the Tetracide and she tells the people, "I'm gonna have to make you all deaf. You can do this. Wonder Woman believes in you." And I'm like, "That's Wonder Woman right there."
I mean, it's kind of crazy that even the mainline Wonder Woman, she's never given a speech like that.
It's to the point, Britt, that people say maybe James Gunn should adapt the Absolute Wonder Woman for the DCU.
At this point, yeah. If
I
you
have seen that point, and I'm like, you know what? How big of an fu is that to Tom King?
I mean, if you're not the only version that Gunn should be adapting is Perez. Like
Yeah,
if
exactly.
if you aren't going to do a Perez, then Absolute is the way to go because mainline Diana, first of all, Rebirth was synergy for DCEU, or DCEU was, synergy for Rebirth, and then all throughout now, and then you have Tom King's 1984 Obsession. So that's pretty much, you can't do that. Post Crisis, Wonder Woman was good for Perez. I know that um they have Paradise Lost for with Jimenez, but it feels like they're only using Paradise Lost as the title, not so much as the storyline, you know, because that's really changing to for that to be adapted, that's really changing the setting, the character development, everything like that to something totally different. So, yeah. But other than that, like I said, if you're not doing George Perez early years of Diana, then Absolute is the way to go.
Yeah,
New
exactly.
52, uh,
No, no. They adapted parts of that, but I'm like,
I
let
mean,
that. There's too much of that that has baggage.
that and it's the fact that, it's New 52 had a lot of potential, but because of the revisions and the fact that, you know, she's labeled as the warrior, you know, um, it's just like you said, it's the baggage that goes with it. But if you have, Absolute and George Perez, I think that will be just a different but same. It's different, because it is something unique for Diana, but it's the same as in her core.
Exactly. So then again, like Britt and I have said, we want our heroes to be flawed because when they're flawed, they can rise above their flaws. And again, Superman and Wonder Woman have admitted that they have flaws. They're saying they don't fit in, or sometimes they feel like they don't like have a place. And it's like we're not like the gods, but we're not like them. So it's like when you try and see that's when you get superhero, that's when you get the Superman's reputation of being a like irrelevant, is when people treat it like he can't do anything wrong.
Yeah, the whole Gary Stu type thing, no.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
This, yeah, Superman, he has to have flaws. I mean, in order to feel that inspiration, I mean, how's he going to inspire if he has everything on a platter, you know?
Exactly. And that's not really the way that's not how you, because you could have characters that are inherently good. It's just when you do the whole like when Mark Wade, you make it so Superman can never do anything wrong.
Yeah,
Wait, you wrote Kingdom Come.
but remember that was not his idea.
You wrote
He just wrote the dialogue
wait.
and
You wrote a Superman origin story where he does a lot of stuff wrong. Oh, I get it. The rules don't apply to you, Mark Wade. I see how that works.
yeah, the double standards.
The double standards. So, Britt, tell me about this Elseworld story concept you have.
Okay, so as I said, we don't want Clark and Diana to be evil. With this, there's just no way to make them cold-hearted evil.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to do a quote unquote evil, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say that they are misguided.
Mm-hmm.
So with this story, it's not, like I said, it's not them being evil. It's not them going into tyranny for power. It's what it was the endless suffering that they were tired of doing, repeating the same thing over and over again. Is that, they try to teach the world to be better and be more peaceful, try to, as they are supposed to. But when the world becomes stubborn, it's kind of like, okay, now we have to be a little bit more forceful. Um, and it is the inspiration is Twilight of Superheroes, Kingdom Come, a little bit of Injustice, but it is really based on Kingdom Come, which is the base. If you want a flawed, darker type story for Clark and Diana, when the realism of the world basically um, going to hell, you know. Um, and it's also that Clark and Diana, and we saw this in uh, Justice League 14, I think. Yeah, when
Mm-hmm.
Clark takes Diana to Smallville. how Diana, she, basically questioned herself because she felt like she was blind, and Clark was like, no, you care for people. You see the good in them. So it is that their flaw is that they love too much, that they care too much, that they want to just see that good, even when the person, kind of like Cheetah,
Hmm.
how I don't like the revisionisms that Rucka gave Cheetah, because the Cheetah itself was not corrupt.
Hmm.
It's Barbara who corrupted the Cheetah. And she has always been a manipulator. She has always been jealous of Diana, you know, but Diana still, she wanted to believe that Barbara, the friendship that she developed with her, that sisterhood, because Diana is all about sisterhood, that to have somebody, feel like they were her sister, she wants to believe that there is some goodness within her.
Hmm.
So that is what this story also, goes, is that Clark and Diana's push was that they always wanted to have this belief that it will get better, you know. But then when a nuclear war happens and seeing children suffering and everything like that, like I said, they become a little bit more forceful. And
It's kind of like what you could do is that you could kind of do like that scene in Wonder Woman Dead Earth where like the nukes go off and they try, instead of fighting, obviously, they try and stop them and they don't stop all the nukes, obviously.
exactly, exactly. So again, this story is more philosophical, more spiritual and emotional, and tragic than just the we're gonna punch our way through things. No, I never. Of course, we have the action that we write, in the story, but it's always going to be more of that emotional and spiritual battle.
Exactly, exactly. So then, obviously, we get the nuclear option. And by the way, again, fantastic choice of image, Brit, because again, this is the part where like Wonder Woman is like, we could do so much more. And this is
Yeah,
like what you could do in the story is flash back to this part of their career when they were young, and they would go, maybe we had a point.
yeah, it's like we we want to help, all around the world. And yeah, this image to say that when Diana says that no one can stop us, she isn't meaning that in a villainous type way. What she means is we have this ability to help around the world. Why are we limiting ourselves to just the United States? Why? When our purpose is to help around the world, we are supposed to be global heroes. And for Batman, and for Jeff Johns to basically shoot this idea down, again, you are limiting Clark and Diana as the characters that they're supposed to be. They're
Well, not only
supposed to be
that, this is where you could have brought in Diana being a diplomat and brought that back. Maybe she starts advocating for the people of Kondak.
exactly, but instead you want to have this Batman moment where
He's a
he's
global journalist.
right. And that's what I said. That's why in every story that we write, or every idea that we have, Diana is always the ambassador of the world, of worldly interest and everything like that. She always travels, and Clark is a global correspondent, like, or a scientist, and even being a farmer. Being a scientist and being a farmer can go together, go hand in hand. Um, and with him loving to write and stuff like that, again, it all goes hand in hand and can work, especially with traveling, and him even traveling with Diana and taking notes of her teachings or what they have learned from other cultures and bringing it all together. And also, how I've said that he would also go out in space and bring knowledge from other Earth, like what Jor-El wanted to. I want to say I said Earth. I meant other worlds, planets, back to Earth. For not only for cultural um togetherness within Earth, but also of other planets.
Exactly. So then we get to how would they rule?
Okay, so this is when they basically everything that they didn't want to happen happens. So Cal obviously has read his father's journal, so he knows the what exactly happened to Krypton. He knows how the elders of Krypton how they ruled, and he felt like at this moment, with his rage of what happened to children and all the innocents, he felt like, well, basically, let me try to do it a little bit better. So instead of the I'm preventing Earth, another world to become Krypton, he's basically, switched and felt like, well, it did work at some point. I'll just do it better to where it's not in that destructive type, lead to that destruction.
Exactly.
And then with Diana, she also felt like that for some reason the gods they have had this ruling, and they were able to have this sort of control, and maybe she needed to, in a sense, lock away some of her better judgments and her emotions to get into the mindset of a god so she could again force that mindset of the people needing to do right.
Exactly. Exactly. And then as good rules happen, there's going to be a corruption.
Right. So, of course, it does work. Like I said, Clark, he feels like I can I can do, um, can turn Earth into a utopia, like Krypton once was, but I'll again do it better so it won't become destructive. And however, with this, the people at first they loved, Clark and Diana for helping and stuff like that. And but then the people they feel like they're not helping, they're controlling us. And in with Clark and Diana being more above them, they start to fear them.
Mm-hmm.
And like I
So,
said,
yeah, go ahead.
and like I said, the whole thing is very much even with this it is a little bit of injustice, and also Twilight of the Superheroes, when Clark and Diana got married and became like their own little kingdom of different kingdoms. But yeah, they basically have that um Diana basically becomes Hera, and uh Cal becomes Zeus without the being, sowing the seeds everywhere. He's very much loyal to Diana. They are, in the in love. They are together. So yeah, he's still the opposite of Zeus.
Hmm. I like this. By the way, you know what this reminds me a lot of?
What's that?
Remember that Squadron Supreme series I had you read for our Zarda episode?
Yes.
There you go. There you go. It's that.
Huh.
Because that's the
Yeah.
concept.
Really? That's
Yeah, the concept is like the squadrons show up and said our world is screwed up, we have to help them,
that's
so they
true.
try and like rule it a little bit, but then they realize that like they've gone too far and now there's no freedom.
That's true. Yeah. Well, basically, well, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, yeah. That if you want a and well, we should have added them that they are stand-ins in a sense too. So
Except they're not
it's
exactly evil, that's the thing.
that's true. And that's the thing even with this is that Clark and Diana, I just can't give them that evilness. They have to be in a sense misguided with, like I said, they are still naive. Their naivety can be a flaw.
Yeah, exactly. So then a superhuman civil war.
So this is where, again, injustice, if you want, some of the Justice Leaguers are kind of like, wait a minute, we're kind of going a little bit too far. And of course, Clark and Diana are like, no, we're not going far enough. And it's either you're for or against us, you know, um, but whoever's for, of course, stay by their side. Whoever is against, they wanted this sort of, you know, um, it's a philosophical type argument
Mhm.
at first, verbal, and then it becomes a little bit more physical, especially with in Batman. I would say that he was not fighting against them. It was just more so he didn't agree too much of the methods. However, with Batman, I would say that he is more selfish,
Mhm.
and he was just like, just stay out of Gotham, but everything else I don't care for.
Mhm.
So with the Batman, he isn't the injustice, you know, underdog hero. He is basically like Kingdom Come Batman who just wants to be in Gotham. But yeah, everyone else is basically like Clark and Diana see them as just as misguided or just as, too innocent, um, and needs to understand what where they're coming from with what they're trying to do. And if you are against us, then you will be basically locked up too with the villains. Or you
Yes,
just either that or you just you can go about your way and do whatever, but you are not on this team anymore.
exactly. And you know what we could do, Britt? What would make what would shock Diana to a core? Donna sides with the heroes that want to depose them.
That will really hurt Diana to the point
All of her
where
proteges are like, you have gone too far.
this is where Diana is like, you are too young eh, to understand, and that horror that, especially with Diana being pressured to,
Mhm.
again, like with Kingdom Come, because she's so pressured to do, you know, do right and be that representation for Themyscira. That is the one thing that Donna or Cassie, or Yara, if we are to have her in the story, they don't understand is Diana's pressure, because she was the chosen one of Themyscira. So she has to uphold this, you know, what she must do. And so she, goes into this state of mind where, yeah, there's no other option. I have to do this in order to be that accepted, and make Hippolyta proud.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then we get to the true test of morality.
So they are now, um, I would say some time has passed. The world is basically, it, it, it functions basically like the, robotic, Stepford. Everything is the same. Everything, like The Giver,
Mm-hmm.
well, kind of like that, where everything is as a robotic and told, what to do, when to do it. The whole world has a curfew. you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's just not. It's it's no uniqueness. It's nothing dramatic about the world. It is a utopia, but it doesn't feel like out of happiness. And it does. It slowly starts turning into Krypton. And that is something that Clark and Diana starts to feel is that it doesn't feel alive anymore. It might be safe, but it's not alive, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So they basically go through the pros and cons. And it's like, yeah, we've brought peace, but like I said, and everything is safe, but there's no liveliness, there's no life, within the people. Everything is all good, but how is it all good when no one's truly living? They're just going day by day doing what we say or what is scheduled, or, but they aren't being themselves. So they decide to one day just be like normal people. And this is like Spirit of Truth. When Diana had at the end of the story, when she had on the sunglasses and the black coat, or her cloak, and she walked among the people. Well, Clark and Diana would do that. They would walk among the people and they would just listen of how, if people basically still have feelings, and what do they talk about. And one day they stumble upon these people talking, and they are in whispers, in fear of, if they are heard, what Clark and Diana would do to them if they are to, you know, yes, there are some lies that they feel, that some people say that, oh, Superman and Wonder Woman, they execute people or something, when they never have done that. But there are whispers of them, and how the people express that they are in fear, that they love them, they worship them, they idolize them, but now they are becoming, the
The
monsters.
very
And
thing they sought to destroy. It's the Obi-Wan
right,
Kenobi thing.
right. So what they decide to do is, with that, it it really shows that, okay, yeah, we screwed up. As much as we wanted to change the world, that's just not what we were supposed to do. So they decide that, well, it's, let the world do its own thing. We won't fight back. We won't, interfere too much. We will just let it be. Let life, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and in many ways, it's also like the ending shot of Red Sun, where Lois looks up and sees just Clark standing there.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that. It's kind of like, we've done all we could. Whether we saved the world countless of times, and it's just the same thing over and over, where it got tiring. We tried to force our way to bring the peace, and life basically stopped. So
Hmm.
it's like, which way to go? There's no balance to that. So, and even with Diana, she finally realized that there's no war without peace, and there's no peace without war. you know that you need that, in a very twisted way. You need those chaotic, you need the chaos, and the you know and also the peace that can balance each other out. No
Yeah,
matter how
exactly.
much they don't want the war and chaos, but that's what they need for it to, just for life to be lived again.
Yeah, exactly.
And so at the end, Superman and Wonder Woman, they decide to, in a sense, retire, you know, um, and they just live their own life. They are tired themselves. And you just have Cal and Diana. Yes, they are immortal. So I didn't really want to do a time frame on this, to say that, that it's been years, about 20 years or so. So obviously, some of the Justice Leaguers, like Bruce or some, they have passed on. So by this time, Clark and Diana are, I would say that to make it easier for them to transition this way, that you see this, you know, godlike couple suddenly appear if they are
Hmm.
to, that at some point Superman and Wonder Woman kind of like they disappear um from time to time, like the Olympians. You know, they are in the Fortress of Solitude, or somewhere like that, where they aren't even seen anymore. So no one remembers really what they look like.
Hmm.
So it's easier for when they decide to become just a a total different identity, you know, or um, and just live a civilian life in a sense. However, the story of them, it is still eternal though.
Hmm.
That before they disappear, they do basically relinquish that control, and they try to let the people know, don't live in fear, live life, and do you are free. And with that, the people around the world have they slowly regain that trust and that love, that pure love that they had for Superman and Wonder Woman once again. And
Hmm.
so at the end, their story is about, they were once loved, they were once feared, and then they were loved again. And
Oh.
they were also inspired. They were also um, inspired, by the people, but also the people were inspired by them. And it becomes where it's like even superheroes mess up, but they have their own redemption, and they, you know, basically apologize to the people, and the people accepted and loved them again. And so now Clark and Diana, as civilians, they learn, okay, like in Spirit of Truth, maybe it's time for us to just, instead of using our powers in the big way, let's do it in a small way. So Cal becomes a farmer, or a scientist, or a teacher of science, and Diana, obviously, she becomes a teacher of literature, and they help with, charities. Diana, she helps with women of abuse and stuff like that. Help. She also helps with women to continue on the fight of equality and stuff. And Clark, he basically shows men, how to be as respecting of women, just things like that that they do as civilians now, other than being just Superman and Wonder Woman. And that's
Hmm.
good, that they aren't, they learn that lesson, that again, they don't have to be, you don't have to change them drastically. It's always just a challenge of the heart, and the challenge of their morals, or a philosophical challenge, but you don't have to just turn them into unlikable people. You can create a story where maybe it is at one point where you aren't rooting for them, but then at the very end, and when you want them to learn a lesson, though, it's all about learning lessons of life. So this is what that
Exactly.
story will be.
It's called the
um
character arc.
yes, character arc, character growth, and yes, the fact that we saw that in Batman Ninja 2,
Well,
that
speaking of
really
that, fantastic transition, Brit.
I'm getting better. I'm twinning with you,
Mhm. First
Brit.
off, fantastic movie. And Wonder Woman in this movie. Oh.
Yeah, it's always a fear that when Diana is featured in anything, she's going to be the cheerleader, or she's going to be a punching bag, or she's not going to have much of a role as significant. And especially, I think that fear and um, that cautiousness come from the second half of DCAMU,
Mm-hmm.
and JLU,
Mm-hmm.
because Diana's, in JLU, her world was, underdeveloped, and she was basically a cheerleader for Batman. She did have certain episodes where you did see a shine of her character at some point, but it wasn't enough. Um, and then with DCAMU, again, the second half, the fact that Tucker purposely had her as a mouthpiece and this stepping stone or whatever for Lois for no reason, really, yeah, it traumatized you. It makes you not trust anything. And it was the same thing even with the Tomorrowverse. When Warworld came out and had that scene of Diana talking to Superboy and calling and saying that she remembered her her Superman. He was like, "Oh, okay." So obviously they were going to reunite, but how was that going to be? And then in Crisis to see them together, it was like, okay, but what's the catch? You know, it's certain things like that. And then to see that in Crisis and for Krieg to say that he is a fan of Wonder Woman, and we can very much tell that,
Mm-hmm.
and how, the ending was Diana with her mother, it really spoke volumes of the care when you have producers and writers who genuinely love Diana, you can feel it. So with here, you can genuinely feel that love and interest of Diana's character, and they understood that she's not a den mother or anything like that. She's just basically the more mature one, and she's the linchpin, or she's the moral compass of the Justice League. And honestly, she should be that even in comics. She is the one that is supposed to be, to me, and maybe it's by, me speaking biasly because she is, our favorite character, but Diana is the one that is supposed to lead. Yes, Clark is supposed to lead too, but Diana is, with her story and the Amazons and what they represent, and like I said, being a strategist, being that warrior, understanding, how to really move forward and everything. I truly believe she is supposed to be the leader, and we saw that here,
Oh,
in this
oh,
movie.
so well.
Yeah. So, love the design.
Mm-hmm.
The And I know you would definitely take cues, especially with the tattoo. That is something that really stood out. Loved it. It
I
really
love
gave
how
that.
all of them glow, because that is such a genius way to do the cost. Because Clarkson, that's a genius way to do the blue suit with I'm just gonna call him Clark, with Clark, and it's like with the other leaguers, I'm like, that is genius.
Yeah, it really shows also how these characters are multifaceted, and that you can put them in different settings and it works. DC has a multiverse and they refuse to use it properly. But
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed, if you were to have different settings with these characters, I mean, they've done it before, but if you do it, now, you would have more fan interest for sure, and especially in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, have creators and artists that are interesting and that care for the characters. But if you do right, you will definitely, have more fans invested.
But so I'm with this. So one of my favorite parts is when Clark is about to kill Harley, and Diane just comes out of nowhere. Does the Snyderverse thing of smacking the gauntlets together, catches Harley and just slams down like a cannon. I'm like, ah, ha, ha, ha.
You really see how powerful she is. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And her foreplay with Clark, he goes, yeah, We'll see how peg-headed you are when I rip your head off. And then Diana goes, you're going to have to try really hard because I have a thick neck. Just like, oh my God. Jesus. That's so good. And it's like, I know some people thought that like there was some like people hating on Kuriku, and I'm like, he crash landed and was raised by a Yakuza family and then went through an arc. When he saw what Superman is supposed to be, he became Superman.
Yeah, and like you said, this does go with the nature versus nurture type
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, which actually it is hilarious that this movie came out when we were doing this thing. So I'm
Right.
like, oh wow. But it's like, you know, it's interesting. Whenever we have a controversial superhero universe, like the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, Diana is always the one that people make sure to respect.
Yeah, because she's the one also, like I said, she's the more mature one, and she's the one that basically she's she has so much more. If you care for her character, she just has so much more to offer. You know, yes, she's a heavy hitter, but also, like I said, she gives that moral compass and she gives that emotional beat, you know, to any story.
Yeah, exactly. And then how great was it when we were watching? So there's a scene where the machine that makes all this possible goes off, and the Leaguers start feeling like all their multiverse selves merging, or like or like they start to see flashes of the multiverse self. So Brit and I, so I texted Brit. I'm like, new 52, new 52, because they show the new 52 Superman and Wonder Woman, which shows that they're never, even Aquaman, they show the new 52 version of. They're never going to escape the new 52. But it's like seeing that, seeing like Golden Age Wonder Woman, seeing, as Britt says, the chicken armor.
It is. She
I just
looks like
love the way you phrase things, Britt.
thank you. And she does, you know, she does look like a chicken. Like,
A little bit, yeah. But
yeah,
it's like to see all those references, and they're actually recreating some comic book covers with like new 52 Clark when he's holding the American flag, but he's like holding up that tank. That's straight up the Jim Lee cover. And it is, I was blown because have you seen the first Batman Ninja movie?
I have not. I might need
It is,
to.
it is the most ridiculous thing in the world. This one was the most like grounded.
So, I mean, that is the one critique was like the, the first one did not go over well, like with reviews and stuff like that. So,
No,
you
rightly
know, so
so though.
so I might need to watch it out of morbid curiosity just to
Watch it.
see.
Let me put it this way: it's one of those movies that I'll watch. It's one of those. It's so bad it's good movies.
That is hilarious.
This one is genuinely good, and it's like even on that. So Jessica Cruz, obviously my other favorite female superhero is Jessica Cruz, Green Lantern. So when she was in this, I'm like, oh yeah. You have no idea how good it felt, Britt, to see both of my ladies properly represented. And it's like the thing about Jessica that I love about this movie is like, so when they're leaving at the end of the movie, Aquaman goes, you know, because they set this up in the movie that like Aquaman wants to like rule the oceans, and it's like so that's why he wants to go to the main world. And he goes, as they're leaving, he goes, you know, I think I'll stick to the lakes. The oceans are much saltier. And then Jessica Cruz goes, you're just figuring that out now? And then at the end, but when Batman's back, he checks his comms and he's getting a call because he's late to a Justice League meeting. And Jessica Cruz go, we know you just had a time travel story, Bruce, but that's no excuse. And I'm like, oh, the savage. I
Yeah,
just love Jessica in this.
honestly, Jessica needs to have more, you know, a prominent role in the Justice League. She needs to be, she really does fit the, you know, to be adapted more. You know, definitely a missed opportunity within live action. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's a good thing. I, I,
Well, Brit, she is getting her own animated series.
that's true. That's true. But it's an Elseworld. So I think, well, okay, so I would say that that is a better compromise because I
Hmm.
wouldn't want Tom King to write her
No, no,
because
no, no. If there's one issue, if there's one character that Tom King should never write, it's a character that's agoraphobic and has anxiety issues.
yeah,
No.
yeah, that's what I was thinking is that I mean, he would make Jessica even more depressed,
Hmm.
and probably borderline want to off her own self. So it's like,
He did that with
no,
Hal Jordan,
yeah. So no, I guarantee you he will probably have that in the live action Green Lanterns where,
which is why I'm glad she's not in that. But it's
yeah,
so Brit. So let me tell you this: as the one as the co-host that watches a lot of anime, wasn't it hilarious where Alfred made an entire Voltron instructional videotape on how to use the Bat Phoenix?
yes, that whole thing, they, this was very much going with the parody of anime and
Hmm.
it was over the top in the right ways, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
It was appropriately over the top.
yeah, some animes are cringe, some animes are it does a lot, but this really, I would say that I'm honestly surprised that the first film got such bad ratings, so that means that whether they change creative
It's
teams
no,
with
no, it's the
this.
same creative team.
Oh, well, maybe they just took cues of the reviews that they got and was like,
Yeah,
we need to.
I would imagine they took more of like, okay, so here's what we need to do. Because I mean, here's the thing. Batman Ninja is not whole bad. It's good in my opinion, it's good up until it gets utterly ridiculous at the end.
Honestly, I feel like this one was more anime tropes in
Hmm.
a good way, and
Hmm.
then the first Batman Ninja was anime tropes in the bad way, you know.
Maybe watch the movie and decide for yourself. I also love the scene where Wonder Woman starts singing and then Harley
Yes,
Quinn is
that was
watching from in there, and then it's like and then Wonder Woman just opens the door and Harley's like, oh.
yeah, that the random singing was definitely anime. Like
Mhm.
that,
Let me put it this way: it was more organic than it was in Joker 2.
true, true.
But
Yeah.
again, it's like I also liked how they gave each superhero their own like intro. Like I'm Jessica, the Emerald Goddess, or whatever her name is, and then it's like that little panel came up of like them with their name in like Japanese. And
Yes.
I love Batman. He goes, "Okay, Superman, what does your boss refer to me as?" And he goes, "You are the detective." And he goes, "Okay, it's Raish." And how about this? They didn't assassinate Talia, where Raish goes, "Yeah, your mother has no idea what I'm doing."
Oh, that's right. Talia, that is, see, that's what I was saying. All we want is for female characters to have agency and to be respected. We don't want them to be, like I said, for man pain, for the men to, have this sympathy type thing, um, or to make the woman the villain, the main villain. You know, Talia needs respect, and the fact that Morrison, with their very
It's because,
backhanded,
according to them, they didn't read that comic.
which is even more so stupid of why fans
Why
should
wouldn't
not
you?
take this serious. You know,
Hmm.
it the fact that you didn't read the comic but you decided to could write, that's very lazy and it's just mean spirited, you know. Um, I just don't know. what possessed you? First of all, what possessed you to write such a thing? And second, for DC to approve of it and publish it is just so out there. But it's DC, so they do stuff stupid all the time. Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, Talia definitely needs a redemption. Well, not so much a redemption, but a re-imaging, I would say. And hopefully, um, you know, it will be some writer or something that will just better her character. And this time you can force the fact that no, this was not something that she actually did. Morrison was wrong, and it's been retconned out that it, we definitely need a Batman story or comic that just recontextualizes, their relationship and
Exactly.
show that it was out of love. It was just the fact that um circumstances, got in the way. But
Yeah.
Damien is definitely born out of love. Their family is flawed, you know, um, but Talia loves her son. She wants him protected, and she loves Bruce too. It's just her conflict is her loyalty to Bruce and Damien, and then the loyalty she has to her father and the assassins.
Exactly. Now, the other thing that I liked about this movie is that you could say it's Bat God, which to a degree it is, but remember, see, here's the thing. When Bruce is talking to Kuriku, he's basically saying, "You are not Superman. Here's who Superman is," and he outlines what a great guy Superman is. So I'm like, at that point, because they could have just had him beat the Man of
Kuroku.
Steel up. But
Mm-hmm.
no, they had where Batman gives a speech on here's who Superman actually is, and I'm like, in the world of Bat God, I will take that as an improvement.
Yeah, Batman being the mouthpiece for Superman is definitely an improvement.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I was just the other scene that I really loved is to get the tower back back in their little long story. Go watch the movie. Arthur, Barry, and Jessica combine their powers and make a giant green sea dragon, and I'm like, it is the most gorgeous thing I have ever seen in these movies. I am like, wow. And I'm like, why don't they do that in the main universe? That'd be cool.
Anime dragons are always cool.
Yeah, exactly. Anime dragons are always cool. I also love here. There was some ridiculousness in this movie, like Arthur sends a message on a sea turtle.
Yeah, the giant sea turtle was ridiculous.
Or how
That
about
was
when Nightwing fights Jessica in his 80s costume, essentially?
they I mean, it was good that, basically making fun of and having that comedic timing, and, while also putting, Easter eggs in all the right places, that was good.
Exactly. I also love when they're planning on how to take out the Yakuza League, Tim Drake goes, "This is going to be a tough fight," and the Batman's like, "No, it's not. Here's why: we know how to beat the Justice League, and these people have never been in a fight before." Right?
It,
Did you notice that when they show that when Wonder Woman is explaining the whole history, they show that other Yakuza family? So in this universe, Superman just killed Doomsday.
I mean, that's what makes him better than mainline then.
He didn't even die. But I love the first showing of Superman where Batman's flying, and all of a sudden you just see a laser come from the sky, and then Superman's just standing there flying, and you hear basically the Godzilla theme.
You
I'm looking up there, and I'm like, oh god, that is scary.
Well, that pretty much answers the question of, Godzilla versus Kong and uh who would that be? Obviously, I don't even know why that would be a question, because obviously Godzilla would be, or Superman and Godzilla would be the comparison, and then it would be Kong and Batman, you
Mhm.
know. But the fact that, yeah, if it is to be like the Godzilla type uh the theme or whatever in the background for Superman, that's basically giving you that answer.
Hmm. And then before we move, I'm going to ask you this. How great was it? So, you know what I noticed is that when Diana brings in Damian and Bruce, she's like, they're my guests. I am honor bound to protect them. It kind of contrasts a little bit where like the Amazons traditionally are like suspicious of men, but in this, they're like, no, we have to protect our guests.
Yes, Diana having, like I said, she's not so much as a den mother, as sometimes she's uh made out to be. But the fact that she does give this warmth, and everyone, everyone is welcomed to her. You know, that is always the contrast, and what makes her stand out from the other Amazons is that Diana doesn't see just men and women. She sees people. And, that is why she is basically the greatest protector, and better, even better than Clark, you know, because no matter who you are, she will always protect you, and
Exactly.
she will give you 100% of her trust. And it's like she will give you that. It's not a build up to it. It's she will firsthand give you that, and it's up to you whether you chip it away or you hold on to it.
Exactly. So, contrast. I love how this flows together. We go from a good Wonder Woman depiction to an utter
To
garbage one.
Yeah, I okay. Well,
So,
first
you
of
know what's
all,
funny? So,
mhm.
Emily's actually, you know what? You go first. Go ahead.
Okay. So first, with the fact that we have, um, it took 19 issues for this story to wrap up, which is ridiculous. And it really has strayed so far away from the the initial, premise that it had. The fact that he Tom King turned his story into a Diana is motivated by a man other than and not her sisters. It really speak volume to how, certain writers see Diana. And also the fact that a reviewer, already had an early copy of this and already was talking about, reviewing this and how awful it was. It's kind of like,
I have a
wow.
question.
Hmm.
So, you're telling me that Trinity during this entire thing did not have the lasso of truth around the Sovereign?
Yeah, that's why you can basically call BS on all of this.
But still, I'm like, why wouldn't you put the lasso of truth around him if you're interrogating someone that literally invented the lasso of lies?
Because Tom King doesn't think that far.
Well, and also, see what's kind of funny. So she's in labor. So here's the thing. Here's my theory. So when Tom King was on my buddy Robert's podcast, he mentioned about how the plan always was for Wonder Woman to be the mother of Trinity and for Steve to be the father, and it was always supposed to be Diana's kid. What if that was a fake out because everyone guessed it was gonna be Emily? Because he said Emily's a red herring, but what if calling Emily's a red herring is itself a red herring? So because she's giving birth at this moment.
I mean, that's kind of dumb because he said, and I think he might have uh deleted it off his Instagram, but he said that you will get hints of Trinity's origin in issue 3. And issue 3 is where Steele tells Diana that Emily is pregnant. So why would you say that on your Instagram, that you are getting hints of uh Trinity's birth? And not only that, but even Bleeding Cool has said that Trinity is adopted and that she, like, I think even on when they posted the preview for the Trinity miniseries, they said she's adopted. They continue on with that. So I don't know. I really do think that Tom King probably went back and forth with it. I
I
think
think,
that
or he'll try and justify and say, well, I said the original plan. Or he'll say, well, technically, if Diana adopts Trinity, Steve Trevor's the father. Now, if Steve is not the actual biological father, it would make more logical sense as to why Trinity is going back in time to find her father. Because if it's not, what if she finds out her father's not Steve?
that is what doesn't make any sense. If Diana is telling Trinity all these stories about Steve, and obviously she knows that he's dead. Diana isn't a fugitive anymore, so to she can take her to the gravesite and go see him. Why is it that she had to go to the Sovereign to say who is her father? You know, that just that whole thing doesn't add up. If Diana is so in love with Steve and everything was okay, why didn't Diana tell her about him? I mean, she was talking about, she made a statue of him, when she's a baby. So did Trinity not see the statue?
I don't.
But
None of this makes sense, Britt. That's the thing.
none of it makes sense.
Remember, this is the run where King literally said that had Diana say that like she's like the daughter of a god, and then later confirmed that's the clay origin.
Yeah. And also she says that being the daughter of a god means that she was talking about Hippolyta, but you would say daughter of a goddess, not a god.
Again, Tom King does not know that because he doesn't read Wonder Woman. So that let's all remember that we're dealing with someone that has about the same amount of grasp on Wonder Woman as a character as the creators behind Wonder Woman 1984.
True.
That should tell you something. Let me put it this way: it says a lot when Zack Snyder, with his Wonder Woman, when his original Wonder Woman concept was more Wonder Woman than this Wonder Woman. It says a lot when Absolute Wonder Woman, the one raised in hell, is more Wonder Woman than this Wonder Woman. So then we got the preview for the Trinity series. Now here's the thing. I don't expect. I love the back by popular demand, and I love how like the Wonder Woman fandom was like, "Is popular demand in the room with us right now?"
Exactly. Just crickets. I mean,
I'm like,
this
who's because the only people that like her are like Tom King shills, and it's not even the Wonder Woman fan base that hate her. It's not only just them; it is practically everyone.
and the fact that I mean, that is the most gaslighting, manipulative,
Oh,
solicit.
even but by the way, there was a sentence above this that said the smash hit character.
Yeah, where?
Yeah, I'm like,
Where?
where? Because the time that you have, oh, what was she certainly smash hit Diana's face.
Yeah.
Had
That
to. So here's why I wanted to give this its own slide, Brett. So according to this, as the young hero knows, messing with time doesn't mean she learned her lesson the first time. It has consequences. So my thinking is, what if this is a big what if? Let me put it this way: the opportunity is there. What if they use this as an opportunity? Because remember, this series was supposed to come out much earlier, and then it got delayed. What if they're using this as an opportunity to clean up Trinity's timeline and like get rid of the BS, or maybe admonish, have like another version of Trinity, like admonish, like a younger version for calling Diana toxic or punching her mother.
so it's basically the same thing that they did with John, with having like three or four or five different origins until they and supposedly cleaning up the origin where you make other contradictions. Yeah.
No,
I mean,
what I think they're doing is they're trying to retcon out. So retcon Trinity. They're trying to retcon out the stuff that people hate about her.
so that would mean not having Steve as her father.
Well, again, what if he's not her father? And then Tom King was talking about adopted.
I mean, that would make sense, but then Diana wouldn't be calling, you know, well, first of all, the whole,
The only contradiction on the adoption thing is you actually have a physical baby.
but you know what? She did the clay baby sand, but we didn't really see, like, how we would see when Hippolyta creates
Oh
Diana
God,
and
don't tell me. He's telling this really out of order. The clay didn't happen, but then the Emily thing is taking place before Diana before Diana leaves the baby with the Wonder Girls.
like the fact that we didn't see Diana is creating the baby, sure, but we don't actually see like the baby being created in a sense of um coming to life, basically.
Mhm.
We never see that. We only see the very next issue that now she has Trinity in baby clothes. And first of all, where did you get baby clothes from? And where did you get all that baby stuff
And
from?
why is it Batman baby clothes and not like Wonder Woman?
Yeah,
That's something someone pointed out. Why is Trinity only holding Batman toys?
yeah. Because of course Tom King is like the obsessive ex-girlfriend.
I think he's upset again that his Batman run got cut short because he's made very clear he wanted to do 100 issues of each Trinity member. He hasn't done a single one at 100 issues, and chances are he won't.
And remember, he did want to do, well, he did have Helena Wayne, the whole daughter thing too. So
Hmm.
again, he's just, regurgitating the same exact thing he was doing with Batcat in his Batman run, except he's very consistent with, you know, people already didn't care for Steve, but he's very consistent with making people dislike the character and the relationship, even more so. And then with trying to have them solidified with the kid, it just, especially the way it was brought about. I mean, with calling her Elizabeth Marston Prince, if she, again, if Diana cared for Steve, she would have named her Trevor, Elizabeth Lizzie Trevor or whatever, but it's
Hmm.
not. If she was so in love with him, she would have named her that. Um, Diana does not have the Prince last name in this continuity, or
Yeah, she hasn't used it for that was the weird part. I'm like, when has she ever used Prince? But then again, remember, I think what's happening is King is operating under a under a pre-crisis continuity.
and even if that, yeah, you did do pre-crisis of having Steve
That would
dead and
explain the rah rah America, which is kind of funny how they're doing the whole. They're probably going to do the Wonder Woman in World War II thing to justify Diana being super patriotic.
which is so dumb because how we go from a Diana who basically like screw the government, I'm gonna help globally, to don't put the flag on the ground, you know, and trying to glorify Steve as a military soldier and stuff like that. And again, she even the whole this whole thing was about Emily, and then also her sisters being imprisoned, murdered, and trafficked. And we have none of that. We have not seen any type of update or some type of emotional, you know, something from Diana with them. No, she's only caring about Steve. Even the and I believe that the variant covers at some point, I think that if I'm not mistaken, sometimes the writers, like, they have a say and sometimes
Mhm.
in the variant covers. So I'm not surprised that with with that Tom King wants to have, Steve on the covers. And
Even though he's even once again in the wrong branch of the military because he's showing the variant covers. So remember how I complained about how he went from Navy SEAL to Marine Corps, Brit? He's
yeah,
back to being in the Navy apparently.
yeah, they don't know. Again, no one cares for Steve, so of course they're not going to do any type of
Fair.
deep dive on what military ranking or whatever he's in. They're not going to do that. But it's just the fact that, again, you never built up this relationship. Like, they were together for synergy with DCEU, and basically out of spite of Diana being with Clark, so they can bring back, the traditional relationship with Lois. So by default, Diana was with Steve. But honestly, this relationship still is very underdeveloped, and it doesn't have any merit. It's just going by default. And the way Diana is now being obsessed, kind of like how they tried to do, or they are doing Clark, to make Steve relevant just as much as they try to make Lois relevant, is only, ruining the character. And we see that. And when you have, the fan base pushing back, Superman fans aren't going to push back on Lois too much because they're the ones that want to be the self-inserted Captain Saberthoughts anyway. So it's like, of course, they glorify themselves in that. But Wonder Woman fans want her to be more female centered and have that more exploration of her sisterhood. Where's Etta? The fact that it's been 20, well, within the solicits of 22 issues, and Etta is nowhere to be found. Yeah, that says a lot about Tom King not caring at all for Wonder Woman's actual lore. He
Yeah,
just wants to, he's obsessed with shipping. So he wants to make this a shipping thing with Diana and Steve. He's obsessed with traditional relationships, and he wants to, um, make his mark, but he's just leaving a stain that it will take a lot of bleach to get out.
he is going to he wants to be known as like leaving a mark. Oh yeah, he's going to be leaving a mark on Wonder Woman, certainly a skid mark. So
Exactly.
and I don't mean the tire skid mark.
Right. Yeah.
So I love how we go from good Wonder Woman, bad Wonder Woman to good Wonder Woman. Because okay, so they announced the fill-in artist for Absolute Wonder Woman issue 6. Oh my god!
Yeah, that art really stands out. It is very unique, and it definitely works for Absolute Wonder Woman. I would say that Diana's face in the last panel, her eyes and everything like that, it just works for her.
I love where Hades goes. No one ever escapes from the underworld, and then Wonder Woman goes, "Yeah, but I did."
And then the fact that he also says that, why didn't you search her for weapons? And then the servant says she doesn't have any, and he's like, she is one. Like, her armor, everything is a weapon to her. She
By the way,
and
how about Hades being a melted candle again? But this is way better than New 52.
yeah, this is much better. I mean, the the candlestick head that New 52 was a little bit odd. It very much gave Tim Burton type thing, um, in not so good way. But
Mm-hmm.
this works.
And by the way, so here's my theory because Ferdinand is showing up. What if she has to earn the right to leave the underworld? So she remember in the New 52 where she had to go through the underworld, the maze and the Minotaur. That's what they're doing. By the way, and also, how great is it to see that helmet again?
Yeah, it's much. I would say that I like the art for the helmet, and I like Sherman's art. Um, it's very unique and it's giving you that not so much as a horror vibe, but just that whatever you want Diana to be as a witchy type character that works for there, that fantasy, that dark fantasy type. But this really stands out a little bit more and it makes it seem so cinematic and it just gives that a much more flair
Hmm.
to Absolute Wonder Woman. Honestly, I wouldn't mind this being the art for a few issues or just a permanent like rotating artist
True.
type thing.
I wouldn't even mind if this artist becomes the artist for the main Wonder Woman book when Tom King inevitably leaves,
Exactly. Even that works too.
because it looks gorgeous. Everything is, he still maintains that glow that I've talked about with the colors, but it looks, yeah, it looks cinema. As soon as he was announced as the fill-in artist, because I had seen his backup stuff in like I think one of the Absolute Power issues with the Birds of Prey, and I was like, good lord.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous. And again, you have a controversial issue with Tom King's Wonder Woman, otherwise known as the skid mark Wonder Woman, and then you have the literally absolute Wonder Woman announces, "Yeah, we're bringing in another of character you want, Ferdinand." I swear, the minute they announce, okay, so she comes back and she meets Julia and Vanessa, the fan base is gonna freak out.
Yeah. And the fact that these two books come out, I don't know if it comes out the same
Week.
the same week for next month, like now that will be permanent. But if it is that these books come out the same week, it is going to be hilarious, you
And we can
know.
see that like how this always is like in the top 5 of the week. And then in terms of week, Wonder Woman, the regular Wonder Woman doesn't even chart.
Right. Last issue last month did not chart at all.
Yeah. So how is it there all the way in the ass end of the rankings, Tom King? Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Enjoy 45th place. You were the 45th loser.
Yeah, it honestly, if um I really do think this will go down. And the fact that you have three consecutive issues of filler art and um, you know, y you aren't telling a cohesive story with Wonder Woman.
Hmm.
You want to be on here for 100 issues for your shipping obsession, but you aren't telling a story of Wonder Woman. And then with Trinity, again, the buildup was not there.
Hmm.
So there wouldn't be investment anyway. The buildup wasn't there to care for Steve. It's only by default. But, Diana herself, she's very bland. She's kind of unlikable. She just doesn't stand out at all. And so it's whatever Tom King thought he was doing, yeah, no, it's not working.
Yeah, you ain't doing any of that. So it is just hilarious how Absolute Wonder Woman turned out to be the one book that is saving the Wonder Woman fandom. But that's the interesting part. So I think that is a good place to leave it. We're at 3 hours and 46 minutes, almost at 4 hours.
You had 15 more minutes to go.
Yeah, one day. But so Britt, do you have any stories you want to tease us with?
Okay, so of course we talked about earlier before chapter 2 of the Odyssey story, and how it will be, just as the first chapter, 50-50 of flashbacks and more emotional beats for Clark and Diana. And again, just putting their perspective of how they're dealing with, their children, and how they can hold on to each other and their son, while having that hope that their daughter will come back home to them. And also having the perspective of their daughter, how she can see them and want to be there for them, and go back home to them. And also get into the shenanigans of the gods. Um, and we also have chapter 3, I'm sorry, chapter 4
Mm-hmm.
of Shelter. And with that, this is more warm and homely, very early holiday type feel. So, and it's the calm and happiness before the big storm that will be in chapter 5. So, yeah, we're definitely hashing that out a little bit more. And then also having more of one shots here and there that can be read going into the Shelterverse. I will have references where it's kind of like, yeah, this definitely hits the Shelterverse type narrative, or it's just something random. And then other stories that I have waiting to be updated, I will get those done eventually.
Eventually, you'll upload. Eventually,
Yeah,
you'll upload.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, stay at work, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to General Zod, and he belongs to stay 6 feet in the ground. Zoe is the Max about for life. We'll see you later. Bye bye.